To everyone around him, he's just a quiet janitor working in an office building. What they don't know is that he's been a soldier, a spy, an assassin, and a weapon feared across the world. A deadly virus now flows through his veins, forcing him to inject himself with even more dangerous pathogens just to stay alive. The people mocking him see an ordinary worker. They have no idea they're standing next to a one-man disaster. One day in West Africa, at the Institute of Biochemistry, screams were heard at the plant and an alarm sounded. Numerous armed soldiers were killed, their blood smeared across the walls. People screamed in fear that the alarm was still going on, and the protagonist grabbed a special cube. He radioed the captain of a special 6th group, special number 228, Haotian, to report that the pathogenicity of the super blood virus had been successfully obtained. He asked them to please inform their superiors. At that moment, a shot was fired, hitting the glass cube directly, causing the virus to spread everywhere. The protagonist, terrified, inhaled it. His subordinates shouted his name in fear, but he held out his hand and yelled at them not to come near him, as he was infected. He was terrified, and didn't know what to do, until he suddenly began coughing up blood. 3 years later, in Fuyang City, Anhui Province, the Fuyang Cloud Corporation was mopping the floors in his office at 9 p.m., declaring that he'd find him anyway. He had a photo badge on, and Hao Qian announced that he was finally finished and had to go home. When he turned off the lights, he saw the computer was on, and was surprised that someone had forgotten to turn it off. He thought it was unprofessional, considering the company pays them a lot of money and they don't know how to count it. Electricity is so expensive these days. He went to the computer and saw an explicit video there, which made him start screaming in horror. Damn it. How could anyone watch something like that while they're at work? At that moment, a girl entered the office and asked who he was and what he was doing there. He replied that he was the new cleaner and was on duty. Yumu looked at him in confusion and asked, "New cleaner? Then what is he doing here near these computers? He shouldn't be in this company anymore." At that moment, Yumu noticed the picture on the computer and started screaming with embarrassment and anger. What was he looking at? How could he not be ashamed? He replied that she had misunderstood, but before he could finish, she suddenly hit him in the face with a pillow, causing him to jump to the side and say it hurt. His nose hurt. Yumu screamed that he was a dirty pervert, taking advantage of the fact that no one was there. How dare he watch such filth? Tomorrow morning she would fire him. Let him hand in his badge. Hao Tian begged her to listen to his explanation, because it was a misunderstanding. She slammed her heel on the floor and screamed that there was no misunderstanding. He was caught red-handed, and he still continued to deny it? Was he even a man? Hao Chen replied that he was very sorry. He was just passing by and thought it was abnormal to go to work and watch such films on the company computer. So he was so kind and decided to help. But it all backfired. He suddenly wondered why she became so agitated when she saw him. Was that really her computer? Yumu started screaming in anger at him for talking nonsense and wanted to stomp her foot on the ground again. But Hao Tian grabbed her leg and said, "Beauty." He didn't care if it was her, but insulting someone without even understanding the situation. Isn't that low? Yumu thought it was impossible. She had trained in martial arts since childhood. How did he manage to avoid her blow at such close range? At that moment, she cried out in pain and fell right onto the computer desk, causing him to exclaim, "No." Hao Chan replied that it was a great pose and that there was something to it, causing Yumu to scream in embarrassment. "Pervert, what are you up to?" Hao Chan asked again. "Pervert?" He saw that she was addicted to insults. It seemed he needed to show her what a real pervert looked like. Yumu didn't understand what he wanted to do and yelled at him not to even think about it, but he attacked her anyway, and she cried out in fear. A moment later, he picked up a pen and said, "Okay, it's done." Yumu yelled at him to just wait. He'll pay for everything he's done. She sobbed and screamed at him with tears in her eyes, causing Hao Tian to ask again, "Will he pay?" "Of course, but if this photo were posted on the company forum, she'd become very famous." He showed her an angry photo with words drawn on her cheeks, and told her to remember, girl, that she was the one who attacked him first, and he'd already been very generous to her. He waved his hand and left the office, causing Yumu to slam her fist on the table and scream that he was a freak and she'd make him pay. She, Yumu, swears to it. Sometime later, in the same city, in the Dongcheng slums, a loud creaking sound was heard. Hao Chen entered his room and opened the refrigerator, where he saw many cans of soda. He opened them and suddenly felt ill, stunned and confused. He grabbed the syringe to quickly inject himself with a special substance and cried out in pain. When he managed to do this, he said that it was not bad. This pathogen was much stronger than the previous one. Suddenly, he looked at the syringe and realized it was the Ebola virus. No matter, this wasn't enough, and it looked like in a few days he would need to go to the secret base of the Biochemistry Institute and get some more. Last time, it was funny. I wonder if they've updated their security system? After all, he can come and go from there freely without any problems. He remembered his subordinates shouting his name, but he shouted back at them not to approach him or they would get infected. Tell them to go and find a car for him. The guys didn't understand what he was planning to do, and Hao Tian replied that there was no cure for this virus, and that to prevent it from spreading, he needed to find a secluded place. Life or death is a matter of fate. Let them remember to ask for a leave of absence and simply say that Hao Qian can't return to the team now. 3 years have passed since then. This virus turned him into a savage, forcing him to live in the forest for over a year. Although the virus wasn't cured, at least it was no longer contagious. The only way to ease the pain was to inject other pathogens to combat the poison. How much longer could this continue? He needed to forget about it. Everything was in the hands of fate. If he died of exhaustion now, there was nothing he could do tomorrow, and it was time for him to go to bed. When he lay down on the bed, he suddenly opened his frightened, intensely tense eyes. He didn't understand why it hadn't worked. They were viruses. How could they be useful? Had this virus mutated? Everything around him shone with a bright light, and the protagonist didn't understand what was happening. The next morning, he woke up on the floor next to his bed, breathing heavily. A profuse stream of drool flowed from his mouth, and beads of cold sweat were visible on his face. When he opened his eyes, he was surprised he wasn't dead. And looking at his chest, he couldn't figure out what the sign was. Was it a virus? Hao Tian reasoned it was like a hallucination. All these things around him could only be seen through a microscope. No matter how good his eyesight, he definitely couldn't see this. Wait, something was wrong. He'd never seen these viruses in person. Could it be possible? But before he could fully consider this thought, he stretched out his hand and grabbed the virus that was enveloping it. He started screaming. Could he really see all the viruses he'd injected himself with over the past 2 years? The protagonist laughed because this ability was too useful. It seemed he could shamelessly absorb microorganisms and bacteria for his own needs, and he needed to try it with something. He grabbed a stick, thinking it would do. He'd try using the bacteria to corrode the steel, and a moment later, it worked. This ability is simply merciless, but it requires a lot of physical effort. He turned his attention to the side and realized a virus he hadn't seen before had appeared. He needed to take a closer look. What was it? Hao Qian had studied a new type of virus. It seemed to be able to develop its abilities by absorbing various microorganisms. Hao Qian grinned and realized how amazing it was. He had not only survived the disaster but had even become even stronger. He began to laugh loudly, but suddenly became extremely tired. It seemed he had expended too much energy, and it was time for him to sleep. Sometime later, the office staff gathered at Cloud Fuyang Corporation and greeted Yumu. She is the chairwoman of a group with assets of $1.9 billion. Her nickname is the Ice Goddess. She slammed the door of the CEO's office and, as she sat down in her chair, said that it hurt. It was all because of that jerk from yesterday. She remembered how, because of him, she had suffered such great humiliation, and now she would never let him go. He seemed to have said yesterday that he was the new cleaner, and couldn't understand how a cleaner from her own company could bully her. Yumu clutched her head and realized she needed to calm down, that Yao Yao would be coming soon, and she needed to talk to her about this. At that moment, a girl in high heels and a beautiful dress entered their office, and the employee informed her that the vice president, President Yumu, was waiting for her in the office. She waved her hand and replied that she knew everything. Yumu had been so excited on the phone. What had happened? Yao Yao is the vice president of Cloud Company, a little fox with a bad temper who loves to torment others. She entered her office and asked what had happened and why she needed her so early. Yumu was surprised that she had already arrived and asked her to sit down. Yao Yao lay down on her sofa and said she was so nervous that she almost sprained her ankle on the way. She thought she should go to the spa after work. She took off her heels and scratched her feet, and Yumu asked her to look at herself. What if some man saw her now? Yao Yao asked again. Who would dare come in here without permission? If anyone dared, she would squeeze them dry. She shouldn't pay attention to her friend's usual nonsense. If her friend lost her reputation and couldn't get married, she would have to take full responsibility. But that didn't matter now. What mattered now was what had happened to her. Yumu considered it. Was she really asking what had happened? She had suffered the abuse and humiliation of the cleaner yesterday, and of course, she couldn't tell her any of it. Yumu asked if she had brought the information she requested from HR. Yao Yao replied that everyone was here. Had she lost any important information? Yumu replied no. She simply sensed that there was someone of unknown origin and very suspicious, so she wanted to know if she had any information about him. Yao Yao smirked and asked again, did he do something? If this young lady had gotten his hands on it, he was unlikely to survive. Yumu looked at the resume, stunned, and realized it was Hao Tian in front of her. She exclaimed, it's him. She sat up, feeling her butt still hurt. Yao Yao asked what was wrong and why she had suddenly turned pale. Yumu replied that everything was fine, but she had a task for her. Let her make this man suffer for the next few days. Yao Yao was surprised by this. This man was just a cleaner, and for her, a worthy vice president, to deal with a cleaner? Wouldn't that lower her to his level? His monthly salary was only 2,000, so she thought she might as well just fire him. Yumu screamed that firing him would be too soft. She wanted her to do everything possible to finish him off. At that moment, Yao Yao decided to check her temperature with her hand, and Yumu was surprised and asked, what is she doing? Yao Yao asked again, is she fine? Why is she so angry? Yumu replied that this guy had offended her yesterday, and, besides, she'd been in a bad mood for the past 2 days, so she'd chosen him to vent her anger. Yao Yao smirked and replied that it seemed like that was what had happened. Although letting her deal with this guy was a serious waste of her time and talent, She reluctantly agreed to make her friend feel comfortable. Now she could relax. Yumu replied, okay then, and her main task these days was to deal with the cleaner, and she'd take over some of her work. Yao Yao winked and said she knows how much she loves her. If she were a man, she'd agree to repay her with her body. Yumu told her to leave, already grinning, and Yao Yao closed the door behind her. Yumu continued to stare at Hao Tian's resume and thought about him. She screamed that she wouldn't let him go until he spit blood, and she'd also keep a very close eye on him. With that, she pierced his photo with a pencil. Meanwhile, the protagonist was still lying motionless on the floor in his room. He jumped up and screamed, what? Had he really slept for 3 whole days? Absence from work without a valid reason is punishable by deduction of wages. He quickly got dressed and ran to work, because he couldn't afford to lose it now, and they couldn't fire him yet. As he ran to work, he saw the baker and exclaimed that it smelled delicious and that he should give him 2. The guy asked, Hao Tian, his sister-in-law said he hasn't come to work lately. Did something happen? Hao Tian scratched his head and replied, nothing serious, he'd just been sick for a few days. The man told him to come over for dinner that day. Relatives from his hometown had recently brought him several bottles of good wine, and he knew he tolerated alcohol well. So would he have a few glasses with him? Hao Chen replied that his shift ended early today and he'd come over right after work. After a while, Yao Yao looked at her phone and realized it was truly strange, as Hao Tian hadn't shown up for 3 days. Everything was ready, but why was this guy late for the show? Her phone rang, informing her that Hao Tian had finally arrived at work. She replied, okay, let her behave as they agreed, otherwise she'll be fired. The girl replied that she'd heard him already there, and looking at his excuse on her tablet, said she'd arrived just in time, as it was time for the show. Hao Chen begged department head Lei not to get angry and to let him explain the situation first. He shouted that he didn't want to listen to his explanations or any of his other nonsense. He'd been too insolent. His probationary period hadn't even expired yet, and he was absent from work without a valid excuse. What did he think he should do? Hao Qian, perplexed, replied that he was absent due to family reasons, not because he wanted to skip work. The director shouted, do you think anyone would believe that? It was obvious he just made this up, and according to company rules, if someone was absent from work for more than 2 days without a valid reason, they were fired. Hao Tian asked the department head to stop. He was just a janitor and a small part of the company. Maybe he'd forgive him this time? Last month, someone hadn't shown up for 7 or 8 days, and the department head was angry that this guy was trying to drag him down with him, that they were being watched. He yelled at him to stop, saying there was a camera behind him. Hao Chen chuckled and asked, what's he afraid of, boss? There was no one else here? Or maybe they weren't invisible? He knew there was still a camera there. Was the number of cameras in the manager's office too high? And his instincts told him someone was trying to lure him into a trap. Hao Chen started screaming. He remembered the department head once saying that seeing the company president had a very disgusting character, and that if she died, 1 million people would urinate on her grave. Lei, tears in his eyes, didn't know what to do and mentally begged him not to drag him to the grave with him if he wanted to die himself. Yao Yao was angry that this guy dared to insult even her. They should teach him a good lesson. Yumu told her not to worry because she would support her and wouldn't force this idiot to respect her. Lei shouted, Hao Tian, from now on he will be responsible for everything in the bathrooms from the 1st to the 27th floor. He can forget about the bonus at the end of the month. Hao Tian shouted, no problem. He has a lot of energy and a strong body to do the dirty work. Just don't fire him, please. That's all he needs. He also turned to Lei and asked if he could lend him some money. He was completely out of cash. Lei shouted, does he still have the courage to ask him for this? He has no money and is still absent from work? Let him get out of here and get to work. Hao Tian slammed the door and replied, well then, he'll get to work. Yao Yao mentioned that she thought it would be better to transfer him to the administrative department so they could play with him more comfortably. Maybe even bury him in the work that was tiring her out. Yumu frowned and replied that if the girls in her administration heard about this, they will die laughing. She should forget about it. This idiot is an illiterate high school graduate. What else is he good for besides mopping floors? Meanwhile, the protagonist bought a high school diploma for $200 and is mopping floors. The girls watched them, and Yao Yao commented that he was strong and energetic. This guy has pretty good physical strength. Maybe they should make him a security guard? Yumu screamed that he didn't deserve it. He was a dirty, illiterate, disgusting freak. Just one look at him made her unable to eat for 3 days because of his stench. At that moment, Yao Yao asked why she was in such a bad mood today. Who had upset her again? Yumu asked again. What? It was because of him that she was in such a bad mood, and she should remember to teach him a good lesson tomorrow. Yao Yao replied that she understood and waved her hand. A few hours later, Hao Tian finished all his work and realized it was time to leave. Today he was going to have lunch at his friend's house and he needed to buy something. He couldn't come empty-handed. He went to the department head, who asked if he was finished yet. Then they would see each other tomorrow. Hao Tian again asked him, smiling, to lend him some money for groceries. The leader screamed, what the hell? He'd never seen someone so shameless. Sometime later, a girl walked by on the famous street of missing people in the chaotic Dongcheng district. If people were targeted here, they would 100% be dead. A terrifying-looking guy followed her, and the girl was frightened when she turned around and abruptly started running. Hao-chan realized that with his serious face and the appearance of a gentleman, how could she mistake him for a criminal? Maybe this girl was blind? He thought there were guys here who didn't seem to have very peaceful intentions, and he better warn her. He shouted at the girl to stop, and she started screaming that he was a pervert and running away from him. Hao-chan was surprised and realized that this was too much. The girl thought that this man looked so obscene, and that it must be Mao's man again. It seemed he was chasing her again. Suddenly, another guy stopped in her path and said what a coincidence it was that they met here. Where is she running? Is she in such a hurry to get home? He forgot to tell her yesterday that it was his birthday and he was inviting her to celebrate at his place. Rongrong screamed at him to stop bothering her. She'd already told him she had a boyfriend. He came closer, grabbed her chin, and asked, "So she's rushing off to a date?" Everyone here knew him, and that he never lets his prey go. How about she come with him for a few nights, and then he'll let her go? Rongrong begged him to leave her alone, or she'd call the police. Mao replied that if she dared call the police, he would not only kill her, but also make her entire family suffer. Besides, many people who come to this street are still missing, and she could also accidentally get lost here. At that moment, the protagonist hit the guy in the head with an apple, throwing him aside. The girl turned around questioningly, tears in her eyes, not understanding what was happening. Hao Tian stood nearby with a bag of the same apples and said he was very sorry he bought it as a gift. Could he return it? His friend ran up to Mao, started to pick him up, and asked if he was okay. He replied that in their day, there were still people who thought they could be heroes. How dare he attack him from behind? Did he want to die? Hao Tian replied that he wasn't someone who sought justice, so he only came to see if he could make a profit. Rongrong wondered if this was the pervert who had just stalked her. Did he also want to hurt her? Mao grinned and replied that he was one of them, so what would he share with him when he was done? He offered to help him stuff the girl into the car. Hao Tian screamed, wondering what the hell he was going to do to this girl. The two men were stunned, and he said he was the general manager of the Red Scarf Risk Assistance Organization. Given the current situation, she could entrust the management of this problem to their company. She could use their service for just 1,000 yuan. For a 2,000 yuan package, he can cripple these ugly aliens. And if she wanted them handed over to the police, the cost would rise to 3,000 yuan. The men didn't understand. Did he just call them ugly aliens? Hao Tian said that if she wanted to get rid of the problem forever, he offered them the premium package for only 5,000 yuan. They were an honest company, so they wouldn't accept counteroffers, so she should think about it. Mao became angry and shouted, "How dare he insult his handsome face? Tonight, he would stab him until he died," and he pulled out his knife. When he ran at Hao Tian with a knife, Rongrong shouted that she would take the premium package, and Hao Tian smiled and thanked her for her trust. She would see how right her choice was. At that moment, when the knife was right in his face, the protagonist easily brushed it aside and punched Mao in the face, sending him flying into the wall and cracking his head. Raising himself slightly, he lost several teeth, which ended up in his palm, and screamed that he'd knocked out his teeth. This is bullshit. No one in this area had ever been subjected to such humiliation. Hao Tian asked with a smirk. Really? After that, he kicked the guy in the face even harder and screamed that this was his first time. At that moment, his friend grabbed the knife and began attacking Rongrong, shouting that it was all her fault, that he would finish her off right now. But suddenly, he was captured by Hao Tian's forces, and before he could even think about it, it happened. Hao Tian began to strangle him, and the guy screamed in pain and a moment later fell to the ground, exhausted. Rongrong was surprised. Who was this guy? He was too strong. Hao Tian kicked Mao in the back again and said the mission was successful. If she didn't want to see those two ugly aliens again, she could order a diamond package. He could get rid of them, and even the police wouldn't find a trace of them. She replied that she didn't need it and that she thought he really could do what he said. Rongrong thanked him, saying he was a good man and would be blessed for his good deeds. Hao Tian replied that he didn't need her blessings, and he needed money. She said she didn't have enough money in her wallet, only 300 yuan. Hao Tian asked if she was that poor. She replied that she had just started working, so she didn't have much money, and she would give him the rest later, she swears. Hao Tian replied that she could pay the remaining 4,700 yuan in installments, with an interest rate of 10% for 1 year, 20% for 2 years, and payment due on the 15th of each month. If a client cheats their organization, they will pursue them for the rest of their lives, and he's not trying to cheat them. That's how they treat dishonest clients. He continued to beat Mao until he was blue in the face, and he asked in a trembling voice, "How could he? What kind of person is he?" Rongrong gave her name and said she worked in the surgical department at the city's First People's Hospital. Please don't worry, because she would definitely pay the rest. Hao Tian smiled and said okay. Seeing her sincerity, he wouldn't charge her for this month. She replied, "Okay, in that case," and she left. The girl wandered on, but Hao Chen followed her for a while. The girl was tense, and it turned out they had entered the same entrance. She started up the stairs and turned around and said, "Mr. Red Scarf, even though she's not rich, she won't abandon her debt. He already knew where she worked, so did he need to know where her home was? He replied that he believed her honesty and that she was mistaken. He had come to visit a friend. After all, he lived in this building. He pointed toward the door, and Rongrong realized that their building only had a few apartments, and her mother had said she'd have a guest today. Could he be that same Haotian? Haotian was surprised. How did she know his name? By the way, her last name was Song, wasn't it? Could it be that the donut seller was her father? She answered correctly, and she didn't know he was Haotian's uncle. This made her embarrassed, and Haotian became angry, saying it was incredible how his friend could have such a beautiful daughter. He laughed and replied that their age difference wasn't that big, so she shouldn't call him uncle. She replied no. He was her father's friend, so she should call him uncle. Since he was her uncle, could she not return his money? Haotian replied no, the contract was already signed, unfortunately, and it couldn't be broken or cancelled. At that moment, she walked down the stairs toward him and asked if she could get a discount. He scratched his head and replied that he could waive the commission fee, but the principal payment had to be paid. Rongrong thanked him for this, and Haotian thought it was hard to believe his friend had such a sweet and cunning daughter. At that moment, Rongrong's mother just came home and asked, "Rongrong, Haotian?" The guys turned to look at her in surprise. She asked if they really knew each other. After that, they entered the house, and Haotian and his friend decided to have a drink. Their glasses collided, and the father of the family said he suggested they have one each to warm up before the meal. He didn't have to worry about the food. Everything would be ready in a couple of minutes. Haotian replied that they didn't have to rush, and in a separate room, Mom and Rongrong began discussing. Zhang asked if she really had met him halfway, and if they really hadn't met before. She replied that it was true, and Zhang remarked that while Haotian was a good guy, he lacked ambition and was lazy. Rongrong asked again, what was she saying? She shouldn't let him hear her. Haotian mentally cried, having already heard that phrase. After some time, many guys gathered in the slums and began discussing everything that had happened recently. Mao bowed to the leader and announced that this man had dared to act on their territory. They must avenge what he did to their friends. The man asked the name of the man who attacked them. Mao replied that he called himself a red scarf, and Tao, after smoking a cigarette, asked, seriously, a red scarf? Okay. Let them take care of the girl first, and he'll try to get his guys to find out about this red scarf. After a while, the guys gathered at a table where there was plenty of delicious food. Haotian said that Zhang really is an excellent cook and it was very tasty. She told him he could eat as much as he wanted, and Haotian began to hurry. She asked, by the way, had he offended anyone in the company? Haotian was surprised and answered, no. And Zhang asked, is he sure? He replied that he gets along well with the employees, except that he was sick for 2 days and didn't come to work, which angered the senior manager. She replied that it was very strange that the senior manager was so angry about this. Incidentally, today she noticed that wherever he went, the camera was constantly pointed at him, as if someone was deliberately watching him. He began chewing more slowly and asked again, is this true? He wondered what was going on. Initially, he'd been working on security, and it was only for the company's peace of mind and the company's team. Now they were deliberately monitoring him. It was normal that they wanted to punish him, but if they started an investigation, they'd likely figure out what was going on. At that moment, he was dumbfounded. Rongrong replied that even if he had truly offended someone, he had nothing to worry about, as he was very young and finding a job wouldn't be difficult. Haotian scratched his head and replied that he actually got along well with everyone and didn't want to change his job yet. His friend chuckled and replied, okay. He appreciated his friend's tolerance. Zhang silently hated him for that demotivating look. He had no motivation or ambition whatsoever. They clinked glasses again and drank. When Haotian got ready to leave, he said it was getting late and he'd go home. Thank you for inviting him to dinner. Rongrong replied, she will see her uncle off. And when the door slammed, Rongrong ran up to him and told him about what happened today. But before she could finish speaking, Haotian replied that she shouldn't worry because he wouldn't tell her parents about it. She should go back because it was already late, or he'd have to save her again today. He waved at her, and Rongrong became embarrassed. Suddenly, Jan came out of the apartment and asked, do you really know them? Rongrong screamed that she really didn't know him. What was she even thinking? Jan replied that she was worried about having an affair with someone like him, who wasn't good enough for her. She replied that he hadn't gone very far and could hear her. Haotian thought that even deaf people would have heard their screams on the street. Rongrong shouted that she already had a boyfriend, and Zhang asked, is this her joke again? Who is he, and where does he work? What is his monthly salary, and when will he come to their house? Rongrong replied that they would talk about it at home. After some time, Haotian returned home and opened the refrigerator again. He picked up the syringe and asked himself, several days had passed and there were still no anomalies. Maybe he didn't need this anymore. He would go to bed, and tomorrow he would need to go to the office to find out who was watching him. When the new day dawned, he arrived at Cloud Corporation, and Yao Yao said nothing. Yesterday was just a small test. Today would be a new show. Suddenly, she received word over the radio that Haotian had arrived, and she told the entire department to take their places. He would pay for everything today. Haotian entered when a security guard suddenly tried to hit him with a baton, but Haotian spun around and caught the baton in his hand, then threw it back and hit the guard with it. Yao Yao was surprised. The next group also needed to get ready. At that moment, a sewage tanker began to move toward him, and a man yelled at him to be careful and get out of the way. Yao Yao said that there was absolutely nothing he could do about it. All that shitty water would pour out on him, and Hao Qian chuckled as he was suddenly able to easily step back and the guy flipped off the tank and into a puddle. Hao Qian chuckled, saying it was a good try, and Yao Yao screamed, "How come?" When he entered, he greeted his boss, who asked if he was already there. Let him sit down. He needed to tell him something. He was lucky enough to avoid everything that had happened before, but this time he wouldn't be so lucky because she had done some work on his chair. As soon as he sat on the table, it would break. Hao Tian began to sit on the table, asking what happened and why he was so serious. Sitting in a chair, he crossed his legs and asked, "What's wrong?" Yao Yao shouted that it was impossible and didn't understand why it wasn't working. Lei was also surprised and didn't know what to say when he suddenly started shouting, "How is he doing his job? Let him see the mess he made yesterday. He's a young man, about 20. But why are his arms and legs so clumsy?" Hao Qian realized that if this man was able to spy on him through the cameras here, he must hold a high position. Lei shouted that from today on, he would have to clean the restrooms from the 1st to the 27th floors 3 times a day. Hao Qian replied that he heard his order, "Boss," and he would go get to work. After these words, he left the office and slammed the door. Lei stood up and looked at the chair in surprise. Then he tried to sit up on his own. But at that very moment, the chair broke. He screamed because his butt was really hurting, and Yao Yao was surprised. It was strange. The chair was clearly broken, so how did this guy manage all this? At that moment, Yumu knocked on her office door and asked how everything went today. Yao Yao replied that dealing with this guy was difficult. She hadn't even been able to relax all day, but he was clearly forcing her to do something else. Yumu asked again, "Something else?" She replied that there was something she wanted to do and whispered in her ear that she would tell her a secret. Yumu asked again, "But wasn't that too much?" She replied that her friend was too kind, and she shouldn't worry about it because she would take care of him for her. Yumu thought about having a meeting that afternoon, so she was in charge of this company, and Yao Yao said okay, she would do her job, and Yumu could be sure of that. After some time, the protagonist found himself in the restroom and washed the floor. He was surprised that they were seriously watching him, even while he was busy cleaning. It really irritated him. Maybe it was the girl he met earlier. No. He didn't think she would dare, since he still had her photo in his hands. First, he'd determine where this person was. Most likely, he should be somewhere in the administrative department on the 8th floor. The girls were discussing what was expected of the president's female army. He checked the entire department but still didn't see her. Suddenly, he was stunned and didn't understand what this girl was doing. Was she the general manager? She was yelling at him to drop everything, clean up, and go up to the president's office on the 8th floor. The copy room was really dirty, so he should go and clean it up. It was Yao Yao who spilled ink in the office, and Hao Tian replied that it was all clear and he was on his way. So she wanted to deal with him? Fine, then he'd play with her a little. After some time, the protagonist found himself on the 28th floor. When the elevator doors opened and he entered Yao Yao's office, he saw an incredible mess on the floor, scattered with paints of various colors. Yao Yao greeted him and said she was so sorry he had to come here because of her. Liu wasn't feeling well today, so she had to call him. The girl had been watching indecent images at work and knew she had to stop watching them at work, or she would get into trouble. Hao Qian was surprised. How could such a thing even happen? Yao Yao replied that she accidentally dropped the ink, and Hao Tian thought that she couldn't have done it by accident. Even the real King Kong wouldn't be that clumsy. Yao Yao replied that they were lucky the boss wasn't here today. Otherwise, she would have gotten a severe scolding. Hao Tian considered that she could continue pretending. He already knew it was her. During his life, he met many different people who wanted to deceive him and even kill him, but none of them succeeded, and they themselves went to hell. He said he could handle this mess in a few minutes, but next time, please let her be more careful. Yao Yao was surprised he didn't even glance at her. Was he completely uninterested? There wasn't a single man who wouldn't like her. What was wrong with this guy? Or had her charm diminished with age? That couldn't be right. She was just as beautiful. Couldn't she charm him? She couldn't believe it. Yao Yao smiled and said, "Okay, thank you very much." Hao Tian thought, wow, how happy she was to be putting a spoke in his wheel. She grabbed his badge and said that it turned out his name was Hao Tian. What a coincidence. Her younger brother had the same name, and he wasn't as tall as he was. Hao Qian said the buttons on her collar looked like they were about to fall off, and she became embarrassed and started screaming. Where is he looking? He's so bad. Hao Qian thought her acting was too bad, and he didn't believe her. She was still too young and inexperienced to fight him. Yao Yao was angry and couldn't understand how he dared look at her delicate skin. She wanted to finish him off right now. 10 minutes later, she entered the office, and Hao Qian said that everything was ready and that she could see if anything needed cleaning. Yao Yao replied that he was doing such a good job and that it was super clean, and Hao Tian said that if everything was here, he would leave. Yao Yao told him to stop because it had been a hard day for him because of her mistake. She made tea for him, and he could drink it and rest before leaving. Hao Tian replied that everything was fine. He wasn't tired and didn't want to drink right now. There must be something wrong with this tea. After all, she'd been pretending for so long just to give it to him. Yao Yao thought that since he was not only rude but also very vulgar, she'd increase the dose for him, and if he didn't drink it, all that work would be for nothing. She said she'd never offered tea to anyone before, and had never treated anyone to this. It was so hard for her to have tea, but he didn't drink it. He was so mean. Let him not be such a bore. Hao-chan replied, okay, he'll drink it all and now they'll see what all this show was about. She laughed, thinking about how he could drink it and feel all the pain in his ass. Hao-chan brought the glass to his face and realized it was a laxative. He grinned, saying that even a super virus couldn't do anything to him, so what would a small dose of laxative do to him? Yao Yao grinned, and Hao-tian said thank you, it's very refreshing. She realized it had worked, and Hao-tian thought that now that she'd made her move, she shouldn't accuse him of becoming a wolf. If he didn't resist, he wouldn't be able to live up to her high expectations, and as the saying goes, he'd do to her what she did to him. Let her feel the pain in her stomach. At that moment, he grabbed his head, and Yao Yao screamed, what happened? He creaked so suddenly, startling her. He replied that he'd remembered something and wanted to hear her opinion, and she asked again, what? Yao Yao was frightened, and didn't understand what this guy wanted, and he mentioned that it seemed one of the girls from their 8th floor had taken offense at him, which startled Yao Yao. Hao-chan said that in the last 2 days, he'd noticed that wherever he went, the camera was constantly pointed at him. To interrupt this, someone from the president's administrative department on the 8th floor, where only girls were, would be needed. Yao Yao realized that this guy had figured everything out quickly and was quite perceptive. Even if someone was watching him, it didn't mean they were interested in him, and Hao-tian replied that he'd thought so at first. After all, he was just a small janitor, and his position in the company wasn't that important, so why would anyone keep an eye on him unless he'd offended anyone? Yao Yao asked, he's such a good person. How could he offend anyone? Hao-tian confirmed this and said, does that mean she also thinks he's a kind, good person? And since he hadn't offended anyone, it means someone had caught his eye. But when he thought about it, it became a little creepy. He was just a janitor, with no money or talent, and the woman spying on him, he believed, was not fully developed. He was sure she had the body of a pig and her personality probably left much to be desired. He was also sure that she was destined to be alone. He didn't know if he could handle her on his own, but if he couldn't, he hoped she would help him. He put his hand on Yao Yao's shoulder and thanked her for listening to his problem. He thought it was time to get back to work. When he left the office, Yao Yao realized he was a good man, but now they'd see if he was still calm in 3 hours. After a while, Hao-tian thought about how the golden diarrhea virus usually takes effect no later than 3 hours. It was a shame he wouldn't be able to look at a beautiful woman in distress. At that moment, a car with Yao Yao at the wheel pulled up and said what a coincidence. She didn't expect to see him after work. He was surprised because he wondered what else she had planned. Yao Yao said that if he hadn't helped her out that afternoon, her boss would have scolded her, so she should thank him. Let them go and she'd treat him to dinner. Hao-tian opened the door and replied with a smile that he didn't think it was worth it. If Yao Yao didn't understand, then why was he even bothering to come here? He got into the car and buckled up, asking where they were going to eat. Yao Yao replied that it would be a very nice place and pressed the gas pedal, saying that he would see it when they got there. As they were driving, Hao-tian looked around and asked if they were leaving the city, but hadn't she said they were going to eat? Or were they going to eat in the countryside? Yao Yao asked again. He thought she was going to eat with him, right? There was a restaurant near the city, and they said it was delicious, so she decided to try it too. Hao-tian replied with a smile that he was looking forward to it, and wondered if she wanted to take him to a place with no toilets and watch him make a fool of himself. Unfortunately, she was about to get a taste of her own medicine. She thought that the action was about to begin, with 5 seconds left until the end. Silence fell between them, and she didn't understand why nothing was happening. Is it because the pills had expired? Suddenly, she felt something wrong and her stomach hurt. She grabbed her stomach and realized that she was in great pain. She hadn't eaten anything for half a day and didn't understand how this could have happened. Because of this, Yao Yao stopped abruptly, grabbed some napkins, and ran into the forest. Hao-tian asked, where is she going? He didn't see a restaurant here. Yao Yao climbed over the fence and screamed, what the hell is a restaurant? Let him stay in the car. She continued running in terror, and Hao-tian asked why she went into the bushes. It wasn't safe. She screamed at him to wait here and not to follow her. She was in a hurry. Hao-tian replied that she could have just told him directly that she needed to go to the toilet. Otherwise, he would have thought she had some kind of crazy fetish. Yao Yao screamed angrily, what is he, an idiot? What does he think she's going to do with a piece of paper? She needs to go a little further. She started taking off her panties and Hao-tian yelled that there might be snakes there and that if she was in danger, she should call him. She got scared and screamed that there weren't any there. He was just joking. She replied that he was a freak. How dare he mock her? She would finish him off a little later. At that moment, she suddenly felt nauseous and vomited. Her hands were shaking, and she didn't understand what was wrong with her. She felt very ill. Hao-tian, who was standing near the car, also didn't understand why she was gone for so long. Maybe something had happened to her? A minor case of diarrhea couldn't kill a person, right? Suddenly, she came out clutching her stomach and told him to call an ambulance and help her. She blushed and felt very ill, when suddenly she tripped over a stone and fell right into his arms. Hao-tian was scared. Why was she bleeding? What should he do? Should he call an ambulance or try to deal with the virus himself? He's afraid there aren't enough hospitals in the world that can cure her. She has little time left, and he needs to sort this out as quickly as possible. He laid her on the ground and placed his hand on her chest when he suddenly felt the virus rejecting him. He realized that at this rate, she could die. and he had to do something. Since recovery had failed, the only way to eliminate it was to fight the virus with another virus, and there was simply no other way. Although he didn't think it would work, and seeing the image of the virus, he asked, is that what he needs? He could magnify microscopic things using visualization. He needed to try to first magnify it and then destroy it, and it should work. He placed his hand on her stomach and began diluting it with the various viruses that were infiltrating her body. A moment later, he saw this yellow virus in a huge ball, and from it emerged a visualization of the golden diarrhea virus. When it jumped near Haotian, he was surprised and asked, is that what it really looks like? It's damn ugly. Even if he freed it, he still can't allow it to hurt other people. So, he didn't want to see this here anymore. The virus continued to spread, and Haotian said he simply had to eliminate it. At that moment, a struggle broke out between them, and Haotian kicked the virus to the side, causing it to fly off. He turned around and glared at it. Haotian created a fiery knife in his hand and began cutting the virus into tiny pieces, destroying it moments later. He hadn't thought he'd had so much trouble releasing the virus, and he really needed to be more careful in the future. He began coughing up blood and realized the virus was too strong, and he'd spent a lot of energy, and his body might not be able to handle it. He had originally intended to save this woman, but instead he had seriously injured himself. He, Haotian, had survived many dangerous missions and had never suffered such injuries. He couldn't believe that he was feeling so ill because of a minor virus and didn't understand what had happened to him. After some time, Yao Yao woke up, clutched her head, and looked around. She realized that her stomach no longer hurt and wondered what had happened. When she looked in front of her, she saw Haotian bleeding profusely and asked, what's going on? She became frightened and started screaming, is he okay? Why was there so much blood around? Maybe this guy who saved her had gotten hurt himself. After all, there was no one else around. Although she didn't know how he had done it, she couldn't just sit and wait for him to die. Because of this, she dialed an ambulance and asked him to hold on. She would call an ambulance right now. He kept muttering, that damn old bastard. Haotian lost his parents when he was a child, and a certain old bastard raised him. Until the age of 8, he lived in the mountains and studied medical books and texts. By the age of 12, he had already learned to dissect a corpse. Just when he thought he'd become a doctor, the old man sent him to war, where he was on the brink of death every day. And when he thought he'd become a mercenary, the old freak sent him on a murderous journey around the world. He was young and cold-blooded, leaving no one even the slightest chance of survival. When he'd shed enough blood and amassed a vast fortune, he was ready to abdicate his throne as the supreme assassin. This old man faked his death and then asked him to join the national unit as a freelance agent. This old man was so good at his job that when he received new documents, no one had the slightest question about his identity. Then one day, while on a mission, he received a message that the old man had died, and before he died, he left him a small wooden box. In his will, he wrote that he would only be able to open it when he was strong enough. He always acted very mysterious. The next day, he tried everything he could to unlock it, but to no avail. After that, he immersed himself in work and spent a lot of time on assignments with a bunch of Secret Service agents, until that mission in Africa, where he contracted a super virus. For him, it was a chance to live a normal life. It's great to have a quiet life, but many people don't appreciate that. Mopping the floor isn't bad either. Sometime later at the hospital, Yao Yao asked the doctor how he was feeling. The doctor replied that there were other patients there, so he suggested they come outside and talk. The patient was fine, only a little weak. Their test results had also been checked and there were no abnormalities. Yao Yao asked, no abnormalities? But that was impossible. That couldn't be true, because she felt her life slipping away at that moment. It seemed he had managed to pull her back from the brink, but in some incredible way, Haotian felt incredible fear at that moment, and suddenly jumped up. He clutched his head and asked, what happened? Suddenly, everything around him shone with a bright light, and he realized his meridians had been purified, and it was simply ridiculous. He never thought he'd cross a boundary he couldn't cross for years, only after nearly being in the afterlife. The guy lying on the next bed asked what was wrong with him. Just let him use his inner strength for a rough calculation, and he'd actually become 3 times stronger. It seemed, with his current strength, he'd finally be able to open the box left by the old bastard. At that moment, Yao Yao entered his office and asked if he was awake. She brought a basket of fruit and asked if he was feeling better. Haotian replied that he was fine, and how was she feeling? Yao Yao blushed and replied that it was all thanks to him. He'd saved her life, hadn't he? Haotian thanked her for these words and said she can express her gratitude in other ways than simply saying thank you. She asked him again what he meant. His roommate left the room because he had misunderstood and decided not to interfere with the proceedings. Haotian replied that he'd just looked at his calendar and it looked like he'd been in a coma for several days. If he didn't show up for work today, the company could fire him. Yao Yao replied that he could be sure she'd help him take time off. Their company treated its employees very humanely and wouldn't create problems. Haotian thought that this girl seemed so smart, but why couldn't she understand what he was trying to say? He replied that he worked sweeping the streets and wasn't rich, so it would be difficult for him to pay the hospital bill. Yao Yao replied that she'd already paid for his treatment in full, so he shouldn't worry about it anymore and would recover more quickly. As for the money for the days he missed, she would fully compensate him for his lost wages. Hao-chin replied that she should have said this sooner. He'd been so worried about it for half a day. At that moment, he cleared his throat and suggested they talk about how much his help had cost that day. Yao Yao asked again, how much had his help cost? Hao Qian replied that he thought she understood the whole situation, because if he hadn't saved her with his ancestral medical skills, she would have died by now. He almost lost his life because of that, and that's what he meant. Of course, he wouldn't ask for a lot of money. Yao Yao became angry, because of course she was grateful, but wasn't he being overconfident? Hao Qian asked her to just give him that much, and she asked again, 1,000? Hao Qian was surprised and asked, how could she say that? 1,000 wouldn't even be enough to pay the medical bill these days, and she asked again, 10,000 then? Is that enough? Hao-chin replied, darling, is her life worth 10,000? She started screaming, is that not enough? He wants 100? Hao-chin replied, yes. After all, she was from the president's office. For her, this should be a drop in the ocean, right? Yao Yao got angry and replied that although 100,000 wasn't much for her, they still had one more issue to resolve before giving it to him. He should know that she is a very decent and innocent girl. That day, she was in a coma and completely helpless. After all, he was a man, and he asked her to stop because he wasn't that kind of person, and she couldn't even imagine what he could have done. At that moment, a neighbor entered the room and was dumbfounded. Yao Yao tearfully said that, by the way, she also saved his life after he lost consciousness, right? So you could say they were even. She didn't force him to save her. Just taking her to the hospital would have been enough. And she wasn't asking him to take responsibility for what happened. He started shouting that he said he didn't do anything, and she should forget about it because he didn't need the money. Yao Yao answered perfectly, and then they forgot about everything. She wondered what this jerk thought he could do to her. At that moment, Hao Tian got angry, got out of bed, and shouted that he was going home. There was no point in staying here. He'd better get his room deposit back. He left the room and was told that the 20,000 yuan deposit he'd paid was still there. They returned the money, and Hao Qian said that since she was asking, he'd take it. Yao Yao got angry, and Hao Qian thought that this girl had paid tens of thousands of yuan in deposits. That would be enough for him for a while. By the way, he still didn't know her name, and she answered. Hao Qian said it was a good name, suggesting they end it all because he had things to do here, and he'd go. They'd see each other at the office. She was going to invite him to dinner, but he was an idiot, so he could forget about it now. When Hao Qian left, Yao Yao was surprised. Why did she think he looked even healthier than before? Sometime later, in the eastern district of the city's slums, Hao Qian was shouting, where is it? Why can't he find it? Hao Qian replied that the old bastard must have left something good behind. He should carefully examine everything inside. He begged the box to open and show him what that damn old man had hidden there. As he rubbed the box, he began to shout, what? Why is this? He slammed the box to the floor and screamed that even in death, he was mocking him. He climbed into his refrigerator again and screamed that he was so angry at that old bastard, he knew he was unreliable. He was so happy, but it turned out it was all in vain. Suddenly, the old man appeared behind him and said, little bastard, they haven't seen each other for a long time. He turned around and didn't understand. Old bastard? The man said that by the time he saw this video, he was sure he would no longer be alive. He knew he must be cursing him right now, but he didn't care, so he could continue. Hao Tian realized the damned old man was about to play some game of his own again. The fact that he could see him meant his power had reached the point of meridian refinement, which was both good and bad. As his beloved disciple, he should know a few things. In fact, he didn't die because his time had come. He died from a serious injury during a martial arts competition. Hao Qian was very surprised by this, and the old man continued to explain that he was actually the head of the Tianjiang Palace of the ancient sect. They had an irreconcilable class conflict with another section, the Flying Feathers sect, and every 30 years, both sides compete in a sect competition. But without a doubt, the Flying Feathers would have an overwhelming advantage this time, and would be hard-pressed to win. Previously, anyone who was a Flying Feathers leader wouldn't have stood a chance, but now things are different. This is all because in the 63rd generation of the palace, there are actually only 3 disciples, and he, Hao Tian, is the only member of the palace in the 64th generation. He cried out, is he now the only disciple? Was he joking? The old man kept saying that the ancient book in this box was a school and a subjugation of heaven, and he must practice well to take revenge and restore the sect's reputation. Hao Tian shouted that he knew the old man had always been hiding something from him. Wasn't this just another way to send him to his death? The old man replied, of course, he knew his boy well, so to prevent an accident, he poisoned him. If he didn't study the 9 heavenly star subjugation to cleanse his veins of poison, he wouldn't live more than 10 years. He was angry that this damn old bastard had done such a thing. This book is called the 9 heavens and stars subjugation. If he persistently cultivated to reach the 2nd level, not only would the resistance villages rise, but he would also reach a new realm. If he was right, he should be cursing him now, but he should accept it. After all, he really did choose him as his successor. Hao Tan burst out laughing, feeling incredibly unlucky. When he arrived home, he asked if it was possible that the supervirus could somehow coexist with this poison. The only question was how long it would last. He can't deal with the supervirus itself right now, and last time he barely had enough to fight a small diarrhea virus. It seems like he's destined for nothing in the lives of ordinary people, like an old man. Although the old freak isn't trustworthy, the book will prove quite useful. It says there are 6 layers, and also says that even geniuses of the previous generation couldn't break through to the 3rd layer. Hao Qian thinks this secret technique is truly difficult to cultivate. The 9 Heavens technique is divided into 2 parts, Yu and Chen. Yu focuses on the use of elixirs and acupuncture, while Chen focuses on cultivating internal energy. However, the creator of 9 Heavens Star Subjugation felt that internal energy was limiting his strength. Therefore, he changed the name of the technique to True Qi, and here's why. Internal energy is relative to tyrannical power, and its quantity is severely limited, while True Qi is gentle and has an inexhaustible supply. If he continues like this, his strength will increase significantly, but he's afraid that to defeat that sect, he'll need to break through to the 3rd layer. And if he can break through the 3rd layer, it will be like a new world, because then he'll be able to refine the longevity heart, which extends life by 3,000 years. Hao Qian thought, isn't that wonderful? He'll be able to eat and drink deliciously for the rest of his life. But it's obvious that's beyond his capabilities right now. At least the sect competition is still more than 20 years away, and he thinks that'll be enough. It looks like studying this technique will now be his main focus. That old bastard, he's caused him trouble again. At that moment, Yao Yao called him on the phone and asked why he didn't show up for work today. He replied that he had something important to do today, and even forgot to tell everyone. She yelled, I'll take the day off for him, and he should try not to do that again. Hao Tian apologized and would try to make amends, and as a token of gratitude for her help, he was inviting her to dinner tomorrow night. She asked again, was he inviting her on a date? He replied something like that and asked why the hell he'd invited her to dinner. If she ate some Western food and then drank a bottle of 200-year-old Lafitte, his strategic reserve of 20,000 yuan would simply disappear. She suggested they talk about it tomorrow. Men who also wanted to invite her to dinner were already lining up 2 blocks away. If she said yes to him now, wouldn't it be unfair to everyone else? He replied that he thought she was absolutely right. Someone with an immoral mindset like him should be decisively rejected, without fail. But no matter, for the sake of his sincere love, she thought. By the way, she hadn't been to the Champs-Élysées for a long time and really missed Lafitte. He shouted, Lafitte? He didn't think that alone would be enough for her. Hao Tian screamed that this was bad. What would happen to his money? At that moment, he became very scared and called someone, asking if he really wanted to pay him back. They answered, hello, was that Red Scarf? Hao Tian screamed, what the hell is Red Scarf? Is he sick? What kind of man is this? Shouldn't it have been Wrong? The guy started to complain that he said his name wasn't Red Scarf. Was she trying to deceive him? Hao Tian said it looked like she was trying to scam him out of his money, and he hung up. At that moment, the guy shouted at him to listen, because his girlfriend was with him, and let her say hello. Wrong told him not to come around these places and that he should call the police. Tao screamed at him to shut up, because he was the one talking. Hao Chen asked what he wanted. Tao replied that he was giving him 30 minutes to get to the location, the address of which he would send on his phone. If he decided to bring the cops, he would kill her. Hao Tian replied that he understood everything, then let him wait for him. Tao replied that he would be waiting for him very much, and Hao Tian became angry because of this. Tao threw the phone at Mao and said that a guest would soon be visiting them, and they should prepare. There were many guys there with all sorts of clubs, ready to make mincemeat out of him. Rong was scared for Hao Qian and thought that he shouldn't come here. Hao Qian got in the car and drove towards them. When Mao approached Rong, he said that she was a little fool, and this time everything would be finished with her. When they were finished with that freak, he would make her want to die. His friend asked, can they handle him? Mao hit him with his crutch and screamed, what, is he afraid? With Tao supporting them, is there anyone in the city who can defeat them? Tao said, stop bragging. There are people above others, and there are those even above them. He also had someone to fear in the city. He approached Rong and said, little girl, he's not the kind of person who doesn't care about insults. If Red Scarf comes, he won't bother her. Mao shouted, no, it was because of her that they became colleagues, so he wouldn't be happy until he tortured her to death. Tao thought, do you deserve to have fun with such a good girl? He turned to Rong and thought that to have fun with her, you'd have to be as heroic as he was. They were all different. The one who beat him was Red Scarf, and as for the lady, she had nothing to do with him. Mao wondered what was going on. If she had nothing to do with it, then who was he? Was he a freak who just wanted to play with a woman? Tao said he was very sorry she had to go through all this, but he had no other choice, so he hoped she could understand. Rong looked at him questioningly and said nothing. He forgot to introduce himself and gave his full name. She could call him a friend. Her friend's words carried a certain weight in the city, and he regretted the offense he'd caused and of course would make amends in the future. Mao was surprised. Would he make amends? Of course. Rong said, Tao, there's no need to go that far. She'll pay him later. He touched her chin and asked how much the favor cost. He was afraid it wouldn't be enough, wasn't he? Rong, it's not that he doesn't want to show her face. The country has its own laws and the family has its own rules. He could spare Hao Chen's life, but he'd still have to give him an explanation. At that moment, he slapped her in the face, and Rong screamed that he would get what he deserved. Tao replied that she couldn't survive alone in the jungle and would understand his character after being with him for a long time. Mao was surprised that he decided to pretend to be kind, and at that moment, someone burst into their room. All the guys looked in shock as Hao Qian entered the room, confidently striding toward his goal. Mao realized it was him and started yelling at Tao, calling him that jerk. Rongrong asked why he was here alone. They had weapons and he should run. Tao asked where he should run. They all surrounded him, and Tao sat down in a chair and said that since he dared to come here, he had courage. It seemed he was a man after all, and he even began to respect him a little. Hao Tian scratched his ear and said that his mother knew well whether he was a man or not. What didn't she tell him? Everyone around him was dumbfounded with fear, and Tao screamed with hatred that he would die today. Does he even know someone's territory, and what happens to those who cross him? Hao Qian called Rongrong and asked her to wait a little longer, because he would soon drag her out of here. She shouldn't worry, because today it was a free service. Tao asked, did he still have time to joke at a time like this? Hao Qian turned and asked, were those two losers from that day here too? He laughed and said he didn't expect that beating them up accidentally damaged their brains. Do they want to be beaten again? Mao shouted, red scarf. If he doesn't leave here lying down today, he swears he won't be considered a man. Hao Qian replied that if he understood correctly, Tao just slapped Rongrong, right? Mao was surprised that he'd ignored him, and Tao told him not to worry about it and to think about not getting slapped himself. Hao Qian realized it was him after all, and after stretching his neck, said he genuinely couldn't understand how such trash could gain a foothold in the city. Could they really be called a criminal underworld? Compared to the Japanese Yakuza and the Italian Mafia, their equipment and capabilities were far inferior. Tao couldn't understand why they were doing this to this guy. How was it that he wasn't the least bit afraid in the face of this fight? It seemed like he was just a poor, sullen kid with no one to stand up for him. This caused one of the guys to swing his club and start screaming, but Hao Tian easily parried the attack with a sharp turn and hit the same guy in the nose, sending him flying and bleeding. Mao asked, what just happened? Tao jumped up and asked, so he's a fighter? He'd underestimated him then. He got angry and shouted at everyone to move forward, not hold back, and fight to the death. Mao went crazy and shouted, what's wrong with Tao? Red scarf. This time he'll bleed all over his body, and when that happens, he'll use the red scarf as a gallows. At that moment, Hao Tian was expecting an attack when he suddenly raised his hand and began sweeping the guys away one after another, easily destroying each attacker. He fought so dexterously and quickly that no one had time to react, and when all the guys were hit, Tao, stunned, asked, what's going on here? All his men were defeated without even touching his hair. He'd never even seen anything like this in a movie, and he couldn't believe it. Rongrong's mouth dropped open in amazement because Hao Tian was truly magnificent. Mao watched the dust that had erupted during the fight in bewilderment and shouted, let him forgive him. He has eyes, but he didn't recognize the mountain. He's a damn idiot. Please let him spare him this time and look at him. He's a cripple. What can a cripple like him do? Hao Tian told him to wait. It wasn't his turn yet. He'd settle the score a little later. Mao fell to his knees before him and began banging his head on the floor, begging for his forgiveness. If he let him go today, from now on, he would do whatever he ordered. He would treat Rongrong like his own sister only if he ordered it. The guy burst into tears and said that this time he really didn't do anything, that he had nothing to do with it at all. Tao admitted that Hao Tian was really something, and he thought, the bald guy seems to have some sense too, since after seeing what happened, he decided to stay. The bald guy approached him and said that he had been in this business for so many years, but this was the first time he had encountered such a difficult opponent. But as the saying goes, even the most skilled martial artist is afraid. MC noticed how he was hiding his hand behind his back and said that if he was going to draw a gun, he should do it now. What's the point of talking about this? The man was surprised. Did he think he was bluffing? He pulled out a gun and said with a smirk that it was a real gun. And then Mao immediately switched back to his side and laughed at Hao Tian, asking what was wrong with his head. He had never seen a gun before. He should hurry up and kneel right now and beg for forgiveness. Then maybe Brother Tao will have mercy and spare his dog's life. He accidentally touched the man with his hand, which caused him to angrily kick him and push him aside, after which he pointed the gun at him and exclaimed, he still dares to brag here? He was going to kill him now. The guy panicked and called himself an idiot for screwing up, and MC called out to the bald guy and asked if he was holding a Glock 17. He should just not tell him that he loaded it with domestic bullets. He wasn't afraid that the bullets might explode right in the barrel. The man thought, doesn't he even panic when he sees a gun? If he admits defeat here, he will be out of business. He pointed the gun at him again and ordered him to stop pretending to be brave. Will his fists outpace a bullet? He respects him as a man, so if he admits his mistakes and follows him from now on, he will guarantee him good food and hot drinks. However, if he decides to disregard his goodwill, he will leave his life here. He grinned and asked why he was still standing here. The man didn't understand what he meant, and he said, if he just shot, he would already be dead, but he is a weakling, so he is afraid to shoot. Because of this, the bald man got angry and exclaimed that he would kill him today, but then he easily snatched the gun from his hands, quickly turned it over, and already had the weapon in his hands. He pointed it at his head and said, his skills are just trash. Is this a toy? How much did he give for this trash? The man nervously told him he paid 50,000 for it, and then he hit him on the head, calling him an idiot. 50,000 for this gun? Is he blind? How could he not see that it was a fake? The pin is so crooked that it doesn't even fire. Because he hit him in the face, he fell to his knees, and then he took the gun apart and asked, did he pay 50,000 for this? Is he rich or just stupid? The man became very nervous and admitted his mistake, and Hao Tian said with a smirk, he shouldn't talk about it. It's better to show sincerity. Tao pulled a knife out of his pocket, stabbed himself in the leg, and asked if he was satisfied now. He picked his nose with his finger and told him that was not enough. Then the man gathered all his willpower and hit himself on the other leg. The MC calmly pulled a booger out of his nose and threw it on the floor, saying he still lacked sincerity. Then Tao began to beg him for forgiveness. He had an elderly grandmother and a young wife in his care. What would happen if he left them alone? He promised that if he offended either of them again, even if he fed him to the dogs, he wouldn't complain. He turned to Ronrong and said that he had been kind to her, protecting her from the gang members, so let her help him this time too. He was sincere. Pity awakened in her and she told Haochin to just look at him. She thought he had already been punished enough. She was sure he wouldn't do anything bad in the future, so they could just forget about it. The MC decided to spare him for the sake of his grandmother and told the other guys they could go too. He turned to Tao, folded his fingers into a coin shape, and said, this is what he meant when he said he was insincere. The man became nervous and afraid that he would start blackmailing him again, and Hao Tian shed a tear, saying that he hadn't had time to eat, and on top of that, he spent a lot of money on a taxi, so he was so scared when he came here. His heart was pounding so hard. Tao couldn't argue with him and exclaimed through his tears that he was right. Moral compensation must be provided. Let him tell him the amount, and he would reimburse him. Then MC approached him and said with a smirk that he was a small spender, so he would ask for little. Let him give him only 1 million. He was indignant and thought, is this in his opinion a little? But he couldn't help it. He forced a smile and told him to just give him the card number, then he would transfer the money to him tomorrow. He patted him on the head, saying that he liked resourceful and smart people. After untying the girl, they were about to leave, but the bald man stopped him. He handed him his business card, saying that if he needed anything in the future, he could always call him. Hao Tian took it and called him a really smart man. He also gave him the keys to his car so that they could get home comfortably. If it weren't for his legs, he would have given them a ride himself. MC said he'd take it. If he could still drive in his condition, he would even consider him worthy of being called the first among the Fuyang underworld. They left the warehouse. He saw his car and remarked that this guy had taste. The car was not only luxurious, but also quite fast. While they were driving, Ronrong thanked him for his help. He said that she had already paid for the service. Today he was just doing after-sales service, so there was no need to thank him. Moreover, she's the daughter of Brother Song, and since they have such a close relationship, she doesn't need to be compensated for the car travel expenses either. She smiled and said, he just blackmailed Boss Tao for a whole 1 million, so naturally he doesn't need to reimburse the car travel expenses. He looked at her puzzledly and asked, what does blackmail mean? Is that kind of person? It's called moral damage. She can't imagine how nervous he was when that call rang. She felt embarrassed and thought, did he just say that he was nervous for her? Does he really care about her? She shook her head, trying to get rid of the thought. She already has a boyfriend, and he is her uncle. She took another look at him and thought that he really looked cool, and she said so out loud. He replied that he was actually an ordinary guy, and she asked, he single-handedly defeated so many bandits and still says that he is ordinary? Isn't that too modest? Why doesn't she call him brother from today? He immediately refused. He was already used to uncle, and he gave her a chance to call him that at the very beginning. She was indignant and asked, couldn't she regret it? He was only a few years older than her, and she constantly felt at a disadvantage calling him uncle. He reminded her that he and her father were old friends, and it would be more correct to call him uncle, so let her come to terms with it. He will not call her little sister. He set boundaries, and she did not bring it up anymore. They drove home. He got out of the car to watch her enter the entrance, but before that, she turned around and said with a smile that during the time they talked, she had developed a certain feeling about him. She can't say for sure, but she has a feeling that he has built a high wall in his heart. At first glance, he is very sociable and caring, but as soon as someone wants to get close to him, they discover that everything they approached was just a big cold wall. He played dumb, saying that she spoke too complicatedly. He didn't even finish elementary school, so he didn't understand her. She smiled and said, since childhood, she envied those who had older brothers, which is why she really wanted to treat him like a brother. She didn't mean anything else in case he suddenly misunderstood her. Also, he's a very good driver. His driving skills are even much better than experienced taxi drivers. She doesn't even mention his knowledge of martial arts. He has so many skills, so why did he decide to work as a cleaner? He answered her that cleaning dirty things gives him a sense of satisfaction. But is it bad to work as a cleaner? Ronrong said that his reasoning sounded good, but unconvincing. He's probably already been through a lot, and both his mind and body are exhausted. So, cleaning is a way for him to relax his spirit, right? He frowned for a second, then smiled and said, she's embellishing things too much. He doesn't even have a driver's license. He told her to stop worrying about him. Isn't she tired herself? Doesn't she want to go home? She insistently suggested that he think about it as soon as she goes home. She knows what's in his heart. She also thinks that he should return this car to the person he took it from. He got into the car and told her to go already, after which she walked to the house and thought he must have been through a lot of things that she can't even imagine. At this time, he looked after her. She is so young, but already too smart. Taking a deep breath, he raised his head and saw a hole in the roof of the car and was surprised. He was wondering why it was so cold, and then it turned out that the sunroof was open. His gaze lingered on the sky. There were quite a lot of stars today, and when was the last time he looked at the sky like that? He went straight to the bank and decided to withdraw some money to treat himself to something tasty today, because tomorrow he would have even more. And when the ATM gave him the money, he saw a man hiding behind a post and watching him. He wondered if it was a pickpocket. Would he dare to act? Seeing that it was this girl, he was surprised. He even felt sorry that at such a young age she chose to become a thief, but he would like to see how she tries to steal money from him. When he was about to leave, she ran out of her hiding place and blocked his path, excitedly asking him to wait. He looked at her mockingly and thought, is this her first robbery? She is so unprofessional. She asked how much money he withdrew, and he asked if she didn't think that was a very abrupt question. She decided to rephrase and asked if he needed her services. He didn't understand what she was talking about, and she sheepishly explained to him that it was a favor that would make him happy. Understanding what she was getting at, he went to the car and said that he didn't need it, that she should look for someone else. She excitedly asked him to wait, that she didn't need much, that it would cost him cheap. He asked how cheap? The thing is, he didn't need it. She burst into tears, offering him a price of 20,000 won, and he indignantly turned to her, exclaiming, had she mistaken him for some rich kid? Even rich people wouldn't want to pay her 20,000, because they could find 10 for that kind of money. She showed him her student ID and said that she was a student at a technological university. She had just turned 18, although this was her first time, and she was generally not bad looking. Her friend, who was studying with her, said that 20,000 was inexpensive. He looked at her student ID and asked if her name was Ting Ting. Fake documents are very common these days. Does she think she can convince him that she is a university student with this? She exclaimed that if he doesn't believe her, he can take her student ID and identity card and check everything at one of the university departments. He threw her documents on the floor and told her to forget about it. He advises her to stop doing this and go home early to rest. Let her not worry her mother. She cried even harder and said that her mother is in the hospital. Could she at least do this for him for 15,000? He looked at her and thought, remembering himself as a child, she looks as helpless as he was then. He asked if she had really made up her mind already. If she had already decided everything for herself, then she should follow him. They would rent a room at a hotel. And so they arrived at the hotel. She was sitting on the bed and was very nervous, and the door to the room creaked open. Hao Tian entered the room and told her that he had finished withdrawing the money. There was a total of 20,000 there. It was quite cold outside, so she should pour him a glass of warm water to warm him up. She poured him some water, and he told her to go take a shower, and she sheepishly asked if she could get his name. He lounged in a chair and asked with a grin if it was necessary. She firmly answered that she really did need it, and he introduced himself. He was 25 years old, and his profession was a cleaner at Fuyang Cloud Company. She was slightly surprised, and he asked if she found it hard to believe. Didn't she? It wasn't exactly a respectable profession. She excitedly began to deny everything, saying that a person's quality was more important than any external things, but he immediately stopped her, saying, now is not the time to philosophize. Let her go take a shower. Then she will have time to think about whether it is worth doing. She walked awkwardly into the bathroom and asked if he minded if she closed the door. Did he? He told her to do as she wanted, after which she thought. She felt like he was different from other men. Usually they looked at her with eyes full of lust. But this guy didn't do that. It seemed he just wanted to help her. Now she wondered how much they paid cleaners per month. 20,000 is far from a small amount. Since this is how things turned out, she should play her role tonight. That way she wouldn't owe him anything. Having finished, she came out to him in just a towel. He looked at her sullenly, remembered his younger self, then clicked his tongue discontentedly and went to the exit, but not before covering her with a towel. She nervously turned to him and asked if he had changed his mind. He told her that he was not in the mood today, so he really had changed his mind. But he always kept his promises, so she wouldn't lose a cent of what she deserved. But let her tell him the reason first. Why did she decide to do this? She didn't want to tell him at first, since it had nothing to do with their deal. But since he was kind to her, she decided to share it with him. Her mother is seriously ill and needs an operation. If she can't raise the money by tomorrow morning, she will be in danger. He doesn't need to feel sorry for her. He paid her, so she can't let him lose. He asked if these 20,000 yuan would solve her mother's illness. She shook her head, and he asked what she would do then. Was she going to continue doing this? She looked down, thought for a second, and answered him confidently. She would do anything as long as her mother survives. He said that he had a proposal that should solve the problem with her mother's medical bills. He will give her 200,000 yuan for 2 years in advance. She will clean, cook, and so on whenever he needs her. She was very surprised and asked, is he kidding? Why does he need her? Since for 200,000 he can find a professional cleaner and cook, he said. He is not giving her his 200,000 for free. She will have to return it when she has a job. Besides, she will have to pay an additional 10% of the amount. Ting Ting was very happy, so much so that she cried. She will not have to overcome herself and do this, so she thanked him and said that he is a really good person. At this time, he awkwardly looked away and thought, 10% and 2 years of free labor, is this called a good person? After some time, he prepared a contract and brought it to her. 20,000 is a deposit. The rest of the amount will be transferred to her within 3 days after signing the contract. She asked, "This is not his wife's money, is it?" He indignantly told her to hurry up and sign everything already. He was still waiting to go home and rest. She signed. He immediately snatched the document from her hands and said that he was leaving. And let her remember, she should not do stupid things anymore. Otherwise, her mother will be upset when she finds out about this. She suggested that he rest here, since it was too late, and he, with a glassy look, told her not to make a scene. If he can't control himself, then what will he become? He left, slammed the door loudly, and she was left alone. She sat on the bed, happily waved her legs, and told her mother that she met a good man today. At that time, he left the hotel. He can't believe that he voluntarily became a student's sponsor. If the old man found out about this, he would laugh at him. He decided to forget about it for a while. He had lost a lot of time, so he would have to train harder today. The next day he went to work. He didn't manage to get enough sleep, so he yawned all the time. Finally, the money Tao promised arrived in his account, plus an extra 500,000. He sent him a message. He had some more money, so he added an extra 500,000. MC wrote back to him and told him to stop talking nonsense. Yesterday, he left his car near the warehouse. He thought that in his entire life, he had never met such a generous person. This guy is not that stupid. He can be useful in the future. The elevator opened and he saw someone interesting. She got on the elevator and he said, "What a coincidence. They met again. How is she doing?" Yumu was very surprised by him, and then there was an awkward silence. He took out his phone and mockingly said that he forgot to post something on the forum. She indignantly told him not to even think about it, and he showed her the photo and asked, "Does she think he doesn't dare? Then they can wait and see." She called him a vile and shameless person, which even made him outraged. He approached her and, forcing a smile through his anger, said that she didn't know him well enough yet. If they knew each other, she would know that he was not vile and shameless. He was very vile and completely shameless. She stared at him in shock and thought, too shameless. This guy, how can he be so despicable? No, she's the deputy head of the company. How can she lose to some janitor? She poked her finger into his shoulder and ordered him to shut up. She'd met many like him. He shouldn't even think he could scare her with this. She was very busy right now and didn't have time to worry about him, so he should get lost and never show up again. He exclaimed with a grin that she had said exactly what he wanted, but she shouldn't take back her words. He hated dealing with women more than anything. They were like brown lollipops that were impossible to get rid of. She exclaimed, why would she even bother with a janitor? She was so furious that she almost wanted to finish him off, but thank God she didn't explode from emotion. The elevator arrived on time to the 40th floor she needed. Clicking her tongue in displeasure, she got out of the elevator and swore to teach him a lesson while he waved his phone with that photo after her. Meanwhile, in the office, Yao Yao saw them on the cameras and wondered what Hao Tian had done. Why was his sister so upset with him? Yumu entered the office and immediately asked how things were going with that idiot, to which she replied she had been busy with work lately because of someone, so she hadn't been paying much attention to him, but she was working on it. She hadn't come to work for several days. Did she have a boyfriend? She tiredly sat down on the sofa and told her that she didn't have a boyfriend, but it was quite possible that she would get married soon. Yao Yao was very indignant and called her a traitor because she had lied to her all these years. Didn't they promise each other that neither of them would get married? And if they did, the other would have to go down the aisle too? Wasn't she pushing her sister into a fiery pit? She replied that she was also very worried, which is why she came to discuss it with her today. She finished her story when it was already getting dark. Yao Yao exclaimed indignantly, "Is this Sushale again?" Yumu wondered, maybe they went too far? She doesn't know where she got that woman with a big belly from, but in front of Xiaolei's parents and many other people, she scolded him as an irresponsible scumbag who plays with women. Yao Yao exclaimed, "So what? He's an idiot." She doesn't understand what happened to her father that he looks at this idiot with a human face and a beast's heart as her future husband. Yumu said sadly, after all, Su Xiaolei is the future president of Su Group. He is not only handsome but also has good manners, speaks and does things gracefully. Of course, her parents like him. Yao Yao exclaimed indignantly that he looks like a hypocrite, and she agreed with her. But this is happening because her dad is dying, and the doctor said that time is running out. Tears appeared in her eyes and the girl asked worriedly, "Is his condition that serious? No wonder he's in a hurry to marry her off." An idea suddenly occurred to her. What if she took the initiative and brought a boyfriend home with her? She asked incredulously. What bad idea had just popped into her head again? She replied, "It was a great idea." Doesn't she think that this would not only satisfy Uncle Lin's desire, but also make Su Xiaolei give in? She said doubtfully, "A boyfriend isn't like Chinese cabbage. How can she quickly find someone suitable?" Yao Yao called her stupid. She can just find a fake boyfriend. This idea seemed bad to Yumu. It was unreliable, And if this man blackmailed her with it, wouldn't it lead to trouble for her too? Yao Yao thought, although this is true, it's strange that this is all she cares about. She said it wouldn't be easy, but she thought she could find the right person to trust. That's all she could do for her sister. Yumu decided to trust her and said goodbye. She hadn't been to the company for a few days, so she'd go take care of business first. Yao Yao wished her success at work, then thought, a toad with 3 legs is hard to find, but a person with 2 legs? Haltian's face immediately popped into her head. She didn't know why, but as soon as she thought of the right person, he immediately came to mind. Chen Haotian, this guy is 100% dependent on money, but if she makes him Yumu's boyfriend, she'll immediately vomit blood when she finds out. For now, she'll forget about it. She needs to arrange a meeting first. At this time, MC received a call. Seeing Yao Yao's name on the screen, he cursed, because he knew she was definitely going to invite him to dinner. He answered the call calmly, pretending everything was fine, and asked how she was doing. She answered him discontentedly that she was doing badly. After all, he forgot to invite her to dinner. He pretended that he really forgot and asked when they were going to dinner. She told him to go down to the parking lot. She would take them straight to the restaurant. The call ended, and he almost burst into tears. What bad luck. Just yesterday he lost a lot of money, and today he was going to be cheated out of money again? He went down to the parking lot and found her car. When he got in, she smiled and he said, since they agreed, let her tell him where she wants to eat. She asked in response, didn't she tell him that day? They were going to the Champs-Élysées. He was very indignant, because this was a complete waste, and suddenly her face gloomed. He noticed this, and asked, what happened? She looked at him with a serious and worried expression and said, she needs him to do a small favor. He asked what kind of favor it was, and just as she started to tell, she suddenly fell silent and thought that she couldn't tell him that. She needed to think about it in more detail. He asked, why she remained silent? Was it a big secret? He tried to get an answer from her the whole way, but she stubbornly remained silent. And finally, they reached the restaurant. She approached the entrance and asked how much it cost. Their steak and wine were excellent. They were shown to an empty table. The waiter approached his colleague and said that the girl with the short hair was so beautiful, and he asked who the guy with her was. He didn't look like the kind of person who could pay the bill here. Meanwhile, Yao Yao smiled and asked Hao Tian how he liked it here. The atmosphere is good, isn't it? He answered her discontentedly that it was just a place to fill your stomach. Can't you do that somewhere else? She disagreed with him. It was her first time dining alone with a man, so she had to choose a decent place, because she couldn't disgrace herself. She called the waiter and ordered 2 steaks, a fruit salad, and a bottle of 1992 wine, and thought that this bottle cost at least 20,000. When he found out about this, he would definitely spit blood. Noticing his expression, she asked if he was upset about something. Of course he was upset. This wine would probably cost several hundred, and lunch about 1,000. With his salary, it would be difficult. She asked in bewilderment. Several $100s for 1992 wine? Did he live in another world? At that moment, their steaks were brought, and he said with a grin that he thought he could afford to pay for everything. She frowned and remembered. The other day she gave him more than 20,000 yuan for the hospital bill, so it looks like she is paying for everything on the table today. He asked the waiter how much this wine cost. He told the price, and he, after taking a sip, said that it is so expensive. He thinks that a dry red wine from the supermarket for $50 would be better than this. The waiter felt awkward. Yao Yao laughed and told him not to worry. He was just joking. After he left, she asked how he could say such a thing. It is a very famous wine. He asked if she knows anything about red wine, and she told him no. And does he understand it? He stared at the steak and thought, he doesn't really understand wine, but he remembers how he emptied the old billionaire's entire collection. His expression was hilarious. How long has it been since he saw him? But that doesn't matter. It doesn't matter much now. Yao Yao called out to him angrily to answer her question, and he said he was just a janitor and only knew how to sweep a floor and knew nothing about wine. But online, they wrote that this 1992 wine was a mixture of pine cones and violets. She said that when drinking this, it was difficult to even taste jasmine, let alone pine cones and violets. He wouldn't be able to taste jasmine. He disagreed. He has a very sensitive sense of smell. Even if he were blind, he would be able to find a person in a crowd by their body smell. She became interested and wanted to test him. Could he remember the scent of her sister that was on her? He thought about it and noticed that she definitely had a familiar scent. She really did smell like her. So that rude woman he met in the elevator today, was she her sister? She laughed and said, not bad. He guessed right. Since they were talking about it, let him tell her what he did to make her so angry. When he told her everything, she looked at him sideways and thought, is this guy crazy? How dare he do this to her sister? He is simply a devil. She is so beautiful. He said that since they had finished eating, he thought it was time for them to go. Let her wait in the car. He will be there in a minute. She asked what was the matter, and he said that she would not be able to run as fast as him, so she would be a burden. She didn't understand what was going on at all, and he decided to say it straight out. It was all because of the food. He wasn't impressed. She indignantly asked, aren't you going to pay for dinner? Didn't he have the money she gave him earlier? He told her that the expensive wine was fake. He wouldn't pay for fake wine. He asked, is he sure about that? Even if it was fake, that wasn't a reason to run away. He replied that she could ask someone to confirm its authenticity if she didn't believe him. This whole situation made her savor it. For some reason, it seemed to her like it would be quite exciting. She went to the car, and Hao Tian ordered 2 more steaks, after which he glanced at Yao Yao and thought, the old fool was right, there's a devil in everyone. After eating, he patted his stomach and burped. Then the waiter came up to him and asked, do you want to pay for the food? He asked him to wait a minute, and the waiter barely blinked before he disappeared. Seeing him run away, he immediately called security and shouted after him. Did they originally intend to eat for free? Yao Yao was already waiting for him at the entrance. Noticing Hao Chan quickly running out of the restaurant, she immediately perked up, and he, climbing inside, told her to start the car and accelerate. She floored the gas pedal, the tires squealed, and the car shot forward, and they escaped the pursuit. MC noted that she was driving rather slowly, to which she replied, if anyone caught her, it would ruin her reputation. She actually needs to maintain it. She dropped him off right on the road, and he got out of the car and said that she could at least give him a ride into town. Does she really want him to spend money on a taxi? She asked. He saved more than 20,000 yuan, and he doesn't even want to pay for a taxi? She had things to do, so she'd just leave him here. He shouldn't be late for work tomorrow. She left, and he smiled nervously, thinking it was weird to hail a taxi in such a place, so he decided to just take a walk. Suddenly, he heard the roar of an engine behind him, and he was afraid that his enemies had come for him, and then a car hit him so hard that he was thrown to the side. The car immediately braked, and a woman got out, worriedly asking if he was okay. Hao Tian cursed and thought, what kind of enemy is this? How could it be her? Yumu ran to him, asking if he could get up, but he didn't answer, causing her to panic. She took out her phone to call an ambulance, but it was dead. He looked at her and thought, she just hit a person with a car. Why does she act like a turtle? Since she is Yao Yao's elder sister, does that mean she is also the CEO? Isn't this a good opportunity for extortion? He raised his hand and asked in a weak voice, what happened? She sighed with relief when she learned that he was alive, and when she saw his face, she was very surprised. She walked up to him and apologized to him. She didn't notice him and accidentally hit him. Let him give her his phone. She will call an ambulance now. He coughed and said that it was most likely broken. Is she taking revenge on him for personal grievances? Even if he made a mistake in something in this life, he is not ready to die like this. She asked him not to say that. She really didn't want that. Let him tell her where his phone is. She urgently needed to call help. He closed his eyes and said that it was too late. He already felt that he did not have much time left. His life had been so hard. He was 20 and still unmarried, but he was already planning to see his ancestors. Yumu became very nervous and began to blame herself for this. She shouldn't have been distracted by thoughts of Xiaolei. Even though she hated Hao Tian, he was still a living person. He extended his hand to her and said that he didn't blame her. That's life. But before he died, could she fulfill his small request? She excitedly apologized to him. She shouldn't have been distracted while driving. She didn't want that. As long as she could do something to help him, she would definitely do it. He asked her to transfer some money to his bank account, which perplexed her, and he explained to her he had been poor for over 20 years, and he wanted to quickly transition to prosperity and become a millionaire before he died. That way, at least he wouldn't be ashamed to meet his parents when he died. After learning that his parents had died, she became even more upset and decided to transfer money to him right then and there, after which he gave her his phone number with his account number. She transferred the money to him, and he was wondering how much it was. And then she exclaimed, how poor was this man in his past life, that he has such a great obsession with money even before death. And suddenly some men appeared. Their leader approached him and said that he thinks there's some kind of story behind him. How about telling him this? He thinks it will be terribly funny to hear. He called Yumu a beauty and introduced himself to her. His name is Ah Qian, and these are his biker friends. She asked displeasedly, what kind of people are they? They saw someone get into an accident and not only do not want to help, but also interfere, talking all sorts of nonsense. Where is their conscience? MC looked at them worriedly. While he was thinking about how to get out of this delicate situation, some strange people appeared. Are they here to cause trouble? Ah Qian asked the girl how she knew if he had a conscience, if they had just met. It seemed like that guy was beyond saving, but she shouldn't worry. If she served him well, he and his brothers would perjure themselves on her behalf. She stood up confidently and declared that he would regret what he said today, and then he walked up to her and told her not to pretend to be brave and bold. It would only provoke him. She was lucky that he had a good character. If it were someone else, he wouldn't be so polite. She immediately slapped him, calling him an idiot, and he, throwing her a disdainful look, exclaimed that if he didn't use her today, he would be ashamed to be called a man. He pounced on her, but she confidently met his attack with a kick to the groin, and his shrill squeal was heard. For Hao Tian, this was such a horrific sight that he didn't even want to look. He knew it would happen. The men exclaimed in rage, how dare she? He ordered his brothers to bring this fool to him, and afterward, they could have fun with her themselves. The bikers ran toward her, and then she declared that this was too much. Suddenly, there were still people in Fuyang who dared to touch the Ling family. After today, she would make them feel the price of their actions. The bikers immediately stopped upon hearing this, and MC thought, It turns out this beauty's background is not so simple. Ah-chan laughed and said that he knew who she was. She was Yumu. And she thinks that because her family has a little stinking money, they are the imperial family. Their Chan family are politicians. At all times, businessmen were afraid of officials. He promised his brothers to deal with the consequences, and Yumu said, suddenly, a jerk like him appeared in the Qian family, which was always famous for its prudent attitude. She turned to Haotian in her thoughts and said, it seems it's too late to save him. She is afraid. She can't even protect herself. It looks like this is her retribution for him. She's very sorry. She closed her eyes, preparing for the worst, but then MC quickly got up and punched the scoundrel who attacked her. She was surprised. He was just lying there dying. He politely turned to her and asked if she was okay. She shouldn't worry. As long as he is here today, none of these people will be able to touch her. But still, what is this place? And why is he here? She stared at him in shock, not understanding what was happening. And he asked why she was looking at him like that. Did they know each other before? She was confused and speechless for a second, and then asked, doesn't he remember her? He answered her. She must have been mistaken. He had been collecting herbs on Mount Wudong all his life and had just come down. Suddenly his head was spinning and his vision went dark, and he woke up here. He looked at the bikers and asked, what was wrong with the people in front of them? They were dressed so strangely. Could they be members of a demon sect? How dare they rob a woman and oppress kindness in broad daylight? Today, a deity must act on behalf of heaven, punish evil and promote goodness, to live in accordance with the earnest teachings of their predecessors. Yumu thought, what is there to talk about? Did the blow cause brain damage? But he speaks so confidently about it, it doesn't seem like he's pretending. One of the bikers turned to the leader and asked if he could be some kind of hidden cultivator. Maybe they should be more careful? Qian slapped him in the face and called him an idiot. This is reality, not some kind of novel. Hao Tian turned to Yumu at this time and told her not to worry. In the Tang Dynasty, evil people will never be allowed to do evil. Let her wait here for a while. He will go defeat those evil people to keep her safe. She felt uneasy. Why did this guy suddenly become so polite? Could it be that he was killed by her and then became possessed by a Taoist priest from the Tang Dynasty? Ah Chin pointed his finger at him and ordered his brothers to finish off this idiot, and he only teased them with a smirk. Ah Qian rushed forward, wanting to punch him in the face, but Hao Qian ducked in time and deflected his hand, then kicked him hard, sending him flying backwards. After that, MC rushed towards the rest of the bikers, scattering them in all directions. And one of them asked in shock, are they filming a martial arts movie here? Even special forces soldiers couldn't do that. One of them was so terrified that he fell to his knees in front of Hao Tun and began begging for mercy. He had pulled a big prank and wouldn't dare do anything bad again. Maybe he could visit the younger one? MC said, people who are not holy sages can have many shortcomings, and the sea of suffering is boundless. If he truly repented, would he dare to utter a secret oath here? The guy swore, and if he changed his mind in the future, heaven would strike him down. He extended his hand to him and said that God values the virtue of life, and now he can go. He threw some bacteria on his hand, and when the guy ran away, he said to his friends, now it's their turn. The time has come to cleanse the world of filth. They thought that if they did this, they would be released, and then they also fell on their knees before him and began to beg for forgiveness. He immediately released them, but not before covering them with germs, and they ran away. Thinking this Taoist was so stupid, they will come back and call more people to kill him. Hao Qian meanwhile looked after them and thought, these people's acting skills are too poor, and their thoughts are written on their faces. Although they will soon die of diarrhea, God will know that these people were really not killed by him. It's all germs. He's just a magnanimous saint. Yumu approached him and asked if he realized he should have called the police. He asked why they would do that, and she told him they needed to be detained. MC advised her not to bring up past grievances. God believes that everyone can change. If a person asks God for mercy, they should spare him and give him another chance. She agreed with him and asked if she could find out the elder's name so she could thank him later. Hao Qian hesitated. He just received $1 million from her, and now she wants to reward him again? He thinks it's not that simple. Is she testing him? He told her that he has a first and last name given to him by the master. His last name is Peng Dao, and his first name is Chen. Yumu said, the Taoist priest must have made a mistake. If she remembered correctly, his last name should be Wu, and his first name is Qi. He exclaimed in surprise, Wu Qi? What does shameless mean? This Taoist came out to save her, but he had no intention of harming other people. Is that the only reason she called him shameless? She was tired of this whole performance and calling him by his real name, told him to come down to earth. The Tang Dynasty has long since ceased to exist. But if he told her now who ruled the Tang Dynasty, she might believe him. He exclaimed in response that in the Tang Dynasty, of course, an emperor ruled and rules. He thought these words were enough to prove that this Taoist had traveled through hundreds of years. After that, he laughed and said he felt that the atmosphere was too tense, so he had to act out the drama of time travel. Let her tune into the atmosphere and relax. This was all for her. She asked displeasedly, when he just asked for money, was he also trying to relax her mind? She picked up the bat those guys dropped and asked if he had any idea how worried he made her by trying to relax the atmosphere. He took a few steps back and raised his hands, asking her to take it easy. He had to go to work early tomorrow, so he needed to leave. He started running, and she furiously ordered him to come back right now, but he was already out of sight. She was very upset and angry at the same time. MC really didn't want to go that far. In fact, he thinks she's not that bad. It would be better for her if she stopped constantly making that face, as if the whole world owes her money. Upon returning home, he immediately started meditating. He hadn't trained for the last 2 days because of a bunch of idiotic things to do. Now he needed to see how far he could advance in a short period of time. But as soon as he started training, he immediately finished and went to bed, deciding to continue tomorrow. If the old man had found out at that moment that he was allowing himself to be lazy, he would have crawled out of his grave and started scolding him. The next day arrived. Yumu was already at work, and Yao Yao, noticing her red and swollen eyes, asked if someone had bullied her. Let her tell her. She would stand up for her. She replied that no one had bullied her. She just felt a little unwell. Yao Yao didn't believe her and asked, is it because of the marriage? They had overcome all difficulties together all these years. But could she believe that this time they wouldn't succeed? Yumu said sadly, although the relationship between the Su family and the Lin family, according to her father, is a life-threatening friendship. Without Su Taohai, her father would not exist today. Yao Yao said that she had several candidates to choose from, but they all seemed a little unreliable to her because she was so beautiful. Even if she resolved matters with her fiancé, there would be other unnecessary troubles. Yumu resignedly noted that finding the right person wasn't that easy, and asked what she thought of Haotian. Her gaze dimmed for a second, and then she walked up to her desk and exclaimed, she doesn't want him to pretend to be her boyfriend, does she? She told her that she felt he valued money, but not people, and they were running out of time. Xiaolei had recently finished researching the US market and should be back soon. Yao Yao objected, but she didn't let her speak because her mother had called. She went to the window and asked if something was wrong. She told her that Xiaolei had returned from the US and that they would all be gathering for dinner tomorrow night. She wanted to tell her in advance, not to be too stubborn. She was no longer a child, she should be more reasonable. Her father's situation was very bad, and it was best to let him go happy. Yumu answered resignedly that she understood, then ended the call and turned to Yao Yao, saying that the situation had already changed. He was back. They didn't have time to discuss this anymore. She should hurry up and call Haotian. Yao Yao agreed and left, and she thought, he has pretty good acting skills. If he can pretend at the meeting like he did yesterday, then she might still have some hope. The MC had just finished cleaning the toilet. Yao Yao approached him and told him to come with her to the president's office. They needed to talk to him about something. When she brought him to Yumu's office, he greeted her with a smile and asked what had happened that was so important that she had asked the vice president to bring him personally. Yao Yao irritably ordered him to be serious. It was very important. They had called him for a serious matter. Yumu asked how long ago he had known who she was. He told her that she was the head of their company and very famous. He knew about it a long time ago. She clarified, by knew about it a long time ago, he meant last night, right? He heard it from that guy? He asked. She didn't invite him for such a trifle, did she? She frowned and said, he is here now so that they can settle the score. How does he think they should settle the matter with the million from yesterday? He answered her that she was the one who hit him with her car. At that moment, he even thought that he had said goodbye to his life, and he thinks it was fair that he received compensation for emotional damages. Once money gets into his pocket, it never leaves. Yumu exclaimed that even according to the law, the amount of emotional damages cannot be 1 million. And he responded by saying, if she asks him for the money back, he can only tell her with regret that he will never give it back. He didn't force her, she volunteered. This gift was legal, and she wouldn't be able to return it. She smirked and said that she was sure he knew a lot about the law, but she guarantees that they will win the lawsuit. He asked, so, was she threatening him? She got up from the table and answered him. She didn't mean to threaten him. He might not give her the money back, but instead he would have to do something for her. He smirked and said that he knew she was a generous person. If she is so kind, how can he help her? She told him about the party at her place tomorrow, and that he would be acting as her boyfriend. She was sure that he would succeed. Yesterday, for a moment, it seemed to her that he had arrived here from the past. He had impressed her so much with his acting. He asked again, confused, did she want him to pretend to be her boyfriend? Had he understood everything correctly? She confirmed it, and he excitedly said that with his background and appearance, no one would believe it if she said that he was her boyfriend. But she didn't care whether other people believed it or not. She just needed him to be present. Haotian offered to let his friend help her since he was better at it, and Yao Yao exclaimed indignantly, he's just a cleaner. How could his friends be much better? Yumu gave him her card with 20,000 so he could buy himself some decent clothes. Tomorrow at exactly 6 p.m., she would be waiting for him downstairs at the cafe. He exclaimed delightedly. Was he really going to get paid for this? Why hadn't she told him about this before? She should know that actors like him are essentially movie stars. They both shooed him toward the exit, and he finally said that they had made the right choice. After he left, Yao Yao asked doubtfully, they had made the right decision, hadn't they? And Yumu hoped so. Time passed. MC had already managed to buy himself some clothes. He left the store and smiled. It had been a long time since he wore a formal suit. He missed it. Ting Ting called him with an urgent matter. She is now at the People's Hospital. If he has time, she will wait for him at the gate. He promised her to come as quickly as he could and caught a taxi. As soon as he got out of the car, the girl ran up to him worriedly and said her mother's operation was not very successful. The doctor said that she needs to prepare for radiotherapy and something like that. She wanted to ask if he could lend her some more money. He answered her that he would not be able to give her as much because of the bank's restrictions, but he would transfer as much as he could to her account. She said that this time she didn't need much, only 50,000. He sent her the money and even added some in case she needed it later. While the bank was processing the transaction, he asked to see her mother, and she thanked him for help. But her mother was still in a coma and might not be able to talk to him. He headed to the hospital and answered her that everything was fine. He just wanted to see her. Maybe he could help her. As they walked to her hospital room, she kept thanking him and calling him a good man, to which he said, "It's rare that he's a good guy, so he'll be good until the end." "What kind of cancer does her mother have? How bad is it?" She said, "Last stage." And he, although he was sorry to say it, said, "If it's terminal, even $1 million, not to mention 200 yuan, won't save her." Ting Ting burst into tears and said that her mother raised her alone, and she knows how much she suffered and how hard it was for her. She doesn't know if she can save her, but as long as she's alive, she'll be happy at least one more day. Otherwise, she wouldn't have a family in this world. He patted her head and said, he knows how she feels. The person closest to him has left him. Maybe that's why he wants to help her. They entered the ward. He approached her mother's bed and thought, Ting Ting's mother's name is Ding Chuyun, so it seems she took her surname. And there is a possibility that Ding Ting Ting is an illegitimate child. She did an excellent job of raising a child alone. He noticed a sleeping bag next to the bed and asked if she slept here. She told him that there was a free bed in the ward, but it was too expensive, so she got out of the situation this way. He offered her to move her mother to a separate room so that she could sleep on a bed there, and was already heading to the attending doctor, but she stopped him because it costs a lot of money, but he insisted. When they arrived at the doctor, he asked if he was sure he was a relative of the patient. He had not shown up for a very long time when the patient was so ill. It was painful for all of them to see such a fragile girl looking after her day and night. Let him just look at how tired she looks. She might faint before the patient gets better. He lied that he had been on a business trip some time ago. Ting Ting didn't tell him anything because she was worried about him. He found out about everything as soon as he arrived. His absence these days had created problems for Dr. Yang, so he wanted to take care of her mother. The doctor said that since he had already heard everything from Ting Ting, he would like to talk to him in person. They both headed for the exit, and Hao Tian winked at the girl, saying that everything was fine. He would talk to the doctor and come back. They walked out the door, and the doctor immediately asked about his relationship with her, and he lied and said that he was her distant cousin. The doctor didn't ask any more questions and told him about the current situation. Judging by the test results, everything wasn't looking so good. Due to the late detection of the disease, even according to the most accurate prognosis, the patient will live no more than a year. He asked, Western medicine is so advanced now, is there really no chance of a cure? He knew it wasn't that easy. Even an old fool who had mastered many medical skills and techniques wouldn't have a chance to cure her. The doctor said that cancer in the middle and late stages is a barrier that modern medicine can't overcome, so there's nothing they can do. As a doctor, he shouldn't have told him this, but he felt really sorry for this child. He thanked the doctor for his frankness and promised him to talk to Ting Ting about the future, and he said, maybe it would be better for her to accept reality. After that, he returned to Ting Ting and said that he would go to her mother's room, tell her to close the doors and not let anyone in until he said so. She followed him worriedly and asked what the doctor just told him, and what was he even going to do. He told her with a serious expression not to worry about it and just trust him. They entered the ward. Ting Ting locked the door, and he said he needed time so she could sleep for now. She kept wondering what he was planning, and he closed his eyes and concentrated. The virus was already raring to go, and with this, it might be possible to destroy cancer cells. But a simple intestinal virus had already been a problem for him before. And this disease is many times stronger than the intestinal one, and it also mutates. Who knows what that is capable of? To be on the safe side, he first needs to repair the organ damage with true qi. Although this will not cure the cause, it will alleviate the symptoms. When his strength rises to a new level, then he will cure her completely. Morning came, he finally finished, and Ting Ting asked if he really cured her mother. He was surprised and asked if she hadn't slept all night. She called him an angel sent to her from heaven, and he waved his hand, telling her to stop. What kind of angel is he? He's an ordinary cleaner. He said goodbye to her because he had to go to work, and she asked if he would come this evening. He answered that he had things to do, but if he decided to come, he would definitely call her. She thanked him again as a farewell. When the door closed, she heard her mother's groans and immediately ran to her bed, asking if she was awake. She rushed to call the doctor. Dr. Yang ran out of his office and exclaimed that this was impossible. According to the test results, there was no way she could wake up. It's just a miracle. MC came to work, and the first thing he met was Yao Yao. She assessed his appearance and asked who this young master was in front of her. Did he even do her hair? He told her that it was her sister who paid for all this, and she said with a smirk, she had no idea that in a suit he didn't look like a loser. Maybe he really will manage to deceive Yumu's parents. He told her to to stop chatting because he still had to mop the floors, and she said that he was free today, he had the day off. He was happy and asked, "Did she do this?" She was so caring. Yao Yao told him that she did it because she needed to properly discuss the details of the performance with him, and he realized that mopping the floors would be better. After they discussed everything, he went to meet Yumu, who was already waiting for him by the car. He waved at her and asked if she was there yet. She was very unhappy that he was late by 5 minutes and 7 seconds, and he awkwardly scratched the back of his head, placing all the blame on Yao Yao. She explained everything to him for ages, and it was because of her that he was late. She ordered him to get in the car. He was driving today. As soon as they got in, she irritably asked him not to call her Miss Lin, otherwise everything would fall apart. He called her Bunny, which made her even more indignant, and told him to just call her by her first name. And he responded by saying, "But lovers have all sorts of cute nicknames. Since she's already committed to performing in the play, let her play it to the end." The car drove off and she furiously ordered him to shut up. Let him just try to say something like that at the meeting. While they were driving, Yumu asked if he even knew how to drive. Haotian replied yes, but he didn't have a license. Yumu screamed, "Is he kidding me? Let him get out and she'll take the wheel." He asked again, "Why is she reacting like that? The road here was bad, and if she drove, they'd definitely be late." After a while, they parked, and Haotian said they were early too. She asked in surprise, "Are you sure he doesn't have a license?" He replied that he wanted to take the exam, but needed money, so he gave up. Yumu asked, "Is 4,000 really money now? What a cheapskate he is." He replied that he was a cleaner, and 4,000 was money to him. Yumu asked him not to get caught in this conversation. Did he understand everything? She herself didn't understand how he drove so easily and why such a talented person chose to work as a cleaner. Why did she feel like he was not who he claimed to be? Haochen asked her to take his arm. He was her boyfriend after all, and they walked like a goose and a duck. She asked again, what was he talking about? He could only dream of such a thing. Haotian approached and said he was warning her right away that if the performance was a failure because of her, he wouldn't be responsible. She took his hand in annoyance and asked if he was happy. He called her sweet and said they could go then, causing her to blush. When they entered the restaurant, the entire group was already assembled. At the table sat the former chairman of the group, her father, Tianhe. Next to him was Yumu's stepmother, Yu Qing. Tianhe said he was addressing Haitao and drinking to his health. He should forgive Yumu for behaving like that last time. Tianhe told him to drop it. They were his people, and they would settle accounts. He shouldn't drink to his condition, and besides, Xiaolei wasn't offended. He should forget about it. He was the company president. And at that moment, Xiaolei himself said yes, this is definitely the limit of this Yao Yao girl. Let them not blame Yumu. Tianhe said it was almost 6 o'clock, and Yumu was still not there. Let her call her quickly. The boss would be here soon, and he couldn't wait for her. Yu Qing replied that she had just called. She was already on her way. There was traffic, and she couldn't fly. Tianhe said that he always spoiled her because she was capricious. Let her at least look at Xiaolei. Yu Qing replied that girls are always like that. Let him remember what she was like. But what is she like now? She's an unemployed housewife with a husband. Haitao asked again, what kind of housewife is she? He would have guessed her to be less than 30. Yu Qing chuckled and said that her Tianhe didn't know how to speak so beautifully. He asked again, what's the point of beautiful words? Let her look at him. After all, he's still single. They told him not to pretend, because he had plenty of girlfriends. He was single only for his own convenience, right? Haitao asked him to keep his mouth shut and not spoil his child. Xiaolei said he hadn't heard anything his father and uncle had said, and at that moment, Tianhe began to think that Xiaolei was a good boy and that if Yumu married him, he could die peacefully. At that moment, the boss entered the restaurant and everyone stood up, saying that he wanted to come here. They apologized for having had a few drinks without him. The boss asked them to feel free to sit down and suggested they cut the ceremony. Tianhe apologized that Yumu hadn't arrived yet and that he should sit down for now. She was already on her way. At that moment, the guys really did approach the restaurant door. Xiaolei invited the boss to sit here, and he told them not to worry and to sit next to him. Zongyan approached Mr. Haitao and said his son was a true talent. Just like the saying goes, father and son are great. He thought their company would soon become the province's leading real estate company. Xiaolei responded that he was too kind and still had a lot to learn and gain experience. He was still new, so they asked him to keep an eye on him in the future. He replied that he only got off work at 6 today, so he hadn't had time to change, and they shouldn't judge him too harshly. Today was the engagement day of his son Xiaolei and Mrs. Yumu, so he asked if he could take the initiative. Xiaolei could just call him Uncle Zongyan. Before they could sit down, Yumu had already arrived. When she entered the office with her supposed boyfriend, everyone looked at them in shock, their expressions distorted. Zongyan's boss also didn't understand what was happening and stood dumbfounded. Xiaolei asked, Yumu, who is this? She told mom and dad to introduce themselves. This was her boyfriend, Haotian. Let him come and say hello. Haotian said hello and apologized, saying they were stuck in traffic and were late. Tianhe was dumbfounded and surprised. Didn't she know about the engagement? What an insult. But since she'd already called him a boyfriend, she couldn't kick him out either. Hao Qian said he was pleased to meet her and that they could sit down. Yumu smiled and asked if anyone else was there. The boss was thinking about how today seemed like more than just a discussion, but the engagement itself. Was this the very important person they'd invited? Yumu realized they were in trouble and didn't know how to get out of it. At that moment, the protagonist placed his hand on Yumu's and looked at her calmly. She was surprised, and he asked why she was worried. No matter what, he was with her. She blushed because of this, and discussions began about how the whole mess was about to start again. If only they were involved, that wouldn't be so bad. But as it is, it's very awkward in front of Zhongyan's boss. At that moment, he slammed the table and jumped up, and Tianhe asked him not to be angry and at least offered to eat together. This is some kind of misunderstanding. Yumu realized that everything was lost, and Hao Qian thought that this guy looked familiar. At that moment, he realized who he was. It was that same old geezer. What was he doing here? Now he definitely wouldn't have a peaceful life. Hao Qian also stood up frightened and asked why he came. With his character, it wouldn't end well. Not here. He can't reveal himself. The boss realized, oh my god, the instructor, is he here? He hadn't seen him for several years. If not for his rescue back then, there would be no Zhongyan today. After these words, he took a special stance and paid his respects. At that moment, he froze and realized he'd known this guy had this habit. Was the instructor really on a secret mission? This was bad, and he needed to figure something out. They shook hands, and the boss greeted him and said, Mr. Hao Tian, this is Zhongyan, the city police chief. He's glad to meet him. Hao Qian said he was so polite and even embarrassed. He was angry because he was so bad at pretending. After all, he told him to be more modest. Did he really just go for the handshake? He was begging him to remember the difference in their status now, and those around the table were stunned by what they saw, wondering what was going on. Why was Chief Zhongyan saluting and shaking hands? Could this Hao Qian really be something special? Hao Qian smiled and thought, this is a scoundrel. They're already starting to suspect him, so let him figure this out on his own. Zhongyan smiled and said that they said the group's chairman, Yumu, was a very talented woman in town and truly extraordinary in person. He was glad to meet her. Yumu thought it was strange. Zhongyan's boss was so tense. Xiaolei told her that she'd named the guy without even telling him. He would have kept an eye on her. Yumu replied that she told her mother about it a long time ago, but she didn't believe them. Since today was a meeting of two families, and there were no strangers, she'd held it. Xiaolei replied, so that's what it means. At that moment, the boss smiled and said that family is a bond of friendship between generations, and they're like brother and sister, like family to them. Since Yumu had brought the guy, he should be happy. He invited him to sit here. Everyone looked at the scene questioningly and said nothing. And while Zhongyan continued speaking, no one frowned. He saw that Hao Tian was a distinguished man, certainly not an ordinary person, and absolutely reliable. He and Yumu are a good match, and his daughter now has a support system. He should be happy about that. At that moment, Tianhe silently apologized to Haitao, as he hadn't expected things to turn out this way. Haitao also silently thought, let the children sort things out themselves. It's better for the old men to stay out of their affairs. Even if there's no wedding, they're still inseparable friends. Yumu wondered why he was so reliable. He was the police chief, after all. Could he really be blind? Tianhe apologized to Zhongyan for coming for nothing, and he suggested they all get a drink. Xiaolei was shocked by what was happening, and realized that this Hao Tian was either a fake or they'd just gotten together. She'd brought in a fake guy to make him back off. She was underestimating him too much. He will definitely disgrace her boyfriend, which he will remember for the rest of his life. At that moment, he stood up and said, Mr. Hao Qian, their Yumu has always been a homebody, outside of work, and he didn't think he could seduce someone like her. Yumu thought it was his time to prove himself, so he should pull himself together. Hao Qian replied that he understood, and said Mr. Xiaolei was joking. Xiaolei replied that he was just joking and shouldn't take it seriously. He wondered silently if she was making fun of him. Hao Qian replied that he was joking too, and laughed. After which, Xiaolei remarked that his sister had the same taste as ordinary women. Judging by him, Mr. Hao Qian must be the CEO of some company. Hao Qian replied, stop joking. He's just a hard worker, not a CEO. At that moment, Yumu turned to him angrily, and Xiaolei asked, a hard worker? Is he joking? Yumu stepped on his foot under the table and replied that Hao Tian had been studying business administration at Oxford University all this time. He had recently returned to China, and she asked him to help her. Hao Tian clutched his face in shame, and Yumu thought about how he needed to listen to her and not act willfully. If he changed the script again, she would rip his tongue out. He replied that before lying, she could have warned him. A diploma wasn't a piece of cake. Xiaolei said so, as if Mr. Hao Tian and their former compatriot had returned from abroad. At that moment, he asked him in English, isn't business administration taught better at Harvard, so why Oxford? Yumu realized things were bad. He decided to set her up, and everything would soon be revealed. At that moment, Hao Qian grinned and looked at him with a smile, while Xiaolei thought he would definitely expose this clown. Hao Qian confidently replied in English, Mr. Xiaolei, the city's business administration is truly first class, but his mentor, Professor Smith, asked him to stay and get a doctorate at Oxford. Besides, they liked the climate and customs of Oxford compared to Harvard. Yumu was surprised. He knew English so well. But how did that happen? Hao Qian grinned, looked into her eyes and asked, How does she like it? Her million was clearly well spent. At that moment, Xiaolei was dumbfounded when he heard about Professor Smith and said that attending his lectures was his lifelong dream, but he didn't expect that he would end up as Mr. Hao Tian's mentor. Let him say he's currently teaching at Oxford. What kind of idiot is he? Professor Smith is such a legendary figure, his mentor. Yumu wondered what else she could call him, having returned from abroad, but he continued to lie. Professor Smith was too much. Haochen replied that he hadn't contacted the professor in a long time, so he could call him now. At that moment, he dialed the phone, and the professor indeed answered, and Haochen said, "Professor Smith, this is Haochen." He apologized for disturbing him, but is he currently at Oxford? He asked during a lecture. Is this Haochen? He was still at Harvard giving a private lecture. How could he be of help? Haochen replied, "Oh, nothing." He just suddenly remembered him and sent him his regards. As soon as the opportunity arose, he would come to Oxford and have dinner with him. He replied that drinking with him would be the greatest honor for him, the highly respected Mr. Haotan. He replied that the professor was still there, but he seemed busy and said he was giving a private lecture at Harvard. Xiaolei was stunned when he heard this and realized he was in those certificates. Professor Smith really does give private lectures at Harvard. Could it really be him? He'd once known one of the professor's students, and he was just too good. It's no wonder Yumu chose him. Now it's clear how he became Yumu's boyfriend. He's just too talented. With such a manager, the Yumu group has a chance of making it into the world's top 500. But don't let them think he'll give up so easily. At best, he's just a bookworm. The city is full of ways to teach him a lesson. Yumu and her entire fortune should belong to him. He remarked that Yumu was extremely perceptive. She'd even managed to lure Professor Smith's favorite student under her wing. He simply admired this. Yumu replied that he was exaggerating. She hoped that today wouldn't create discord between their families. Xiaolei remarked that they'd all been friends for so many years. How could they ruin their relationship over such a trifle? But even though Mr. Haochen is a good guy, he thinks he still has a chance until they get married. If he gives up so easily, he'll never forgive himself. Yumu replied that she thought he had no chance and hit Haotian in the leg again. After all, he was clearly being challenged. He should have said something. Haochen said that everyone has the right to choose and strive, and he respects him. But he'll give him one piece of advice. This is really cruel, and he'd better not think too highly of himself. Otherwise, he'll be ashamed later. Maybe he'll agree to this? Xiaolei replied that they'll see. And at that moment, Haotan stood up and said he was going to the restroom, asking for forgiveness. Tianhe turned to Chief Zongyan and decided to raise a glass to him, frightened, and Zongyan also apologized and said he was going to the restroom. When they found themselves in the restroom, the protagonist washed his hands, and Chief Zongyan approached him and said he was reporting in. Hao Tian called him an idiot and told him, how many times has he told him not to salute just anywhere? Now he's an instructor for the Flying Dragon Squad, no longer in the 6th group, and he doesn't want to talk about the past. He just wants to live peacefully for a few days. Did Zongyan understand what he was saying? Zongyan replied that the instructor's order would be carried out, and Haochen became angry at his reaction and said that before, he thought he was just a bit slow, but today, he realized he was a real idiot. Zongyan realized the instructor had cursed him, which was great. The instructor was still the same, cursing like that, but always doing everything perfectly. Haotian waved and said he was leaving first. If they left together, someone would suspect something was wrong. Zongyan replied that he understood his order, and Haotian wondered why he'd gotten involved with such a clueless guy. It was just bad luck. Zongyan peered at him from the room and said that the instructor was so majestic, he was a real man. When Haotian sat back down at the table, he said the company had business tomorrow, so they needed to leave. He was treating everyone next week and asked them to be sure to come. Tianhe patted him on the shoulder and said that Yumu was now his responsibility and that he should treat her well. He told him not to worry, but suddenly looked at him questioningly and realized that Tianhe was already dying, but it seemed he could still be saved. However, with his current strength, that wouldn't work for now, and perhaps after a while, he could save his life. He smiled and said that they were leaving then. When they approached the car, Yumu pulled her hand away and said enough. There was no need to continue this circus. When they got into the car, Haotian said that judging by this Xiaolei's attitude, she wouldn't take any pleasantries in the future. She needed to quickly find another guy before things got out of control. He shouldn't let him interfere with her, using him as a shield. He asked, is he worthy of this? Haotian replied yes. Of course, he's no match for him, and wants to tell her that this can't go on forever. She asked, clutching the steering wheel with trembling hands. Does he think she wants this? And does she have a choice? Her father's condition is terrible. If he dies, she won't know how to live on. At that moment, she burst into tears, and Haotian looked at her silently. He sympathized, saying that after all, she's just a simple girl in her early 20s, always scheming, with a dying father and a treacherous stepmother. Plus, a bunch of idiots chasing her. She probably has incredibly high blood pressure. He asked her to sit in the passenger seat because he would be driving himself. He would take her to a nice place where she could unwind. They ended up at the Sanlijing night market, where they served ordinary food. When they sat down at the table, Yumu, horrified, asked again, "Is this a good place?" Hao Tian replied that she shouldn't disparage the night market. The atmosphere here was much better than at that banquet. After that, he turned to her and asked if she was born in this city. Yumu asked again, and he wasn't. He replied that he lived here for several years as a child, but only recently returned. Had she ever been to the city's western lake as a child? Yumu replied that she didn't really remember, and Hao Tian explained that back then, the western lake was a remote place, surrounded by poor people. The landscape was miserable, trash was everywhere, but the wild flowers were in full bloom. He often ran there to play and thought that one day, he got so carried away playing that he didn't notice when he stepped on something and was also stunned. Could she guess what was there? Yumu was surprised and asked again, "What was it?" He replied that it was a dead baby. Then he became very scared and immediately ran out of the grass, and at night he often woke up in fear. He was afraid that he would be like that dead baby, rotting alone in the grass, but then he realized that was wrong. Maybe the heavens wanted to tell him that, compared to this miserable creature, he's lucky, and at least, no one has thrown him out like a dog. He should rejoice every day, so when something sad happens, he tells himself he should be glad he's still alive. Even when he dies, he won't be rotting in the sun like that baby. Yumu told him to stop saying that. He wants to tell her she should be glad she's alive and happy, and is he also implying that she's always frowning and should smile more? He replied that he didn't say that, and if that's how she understood it, it's not his fault. This made Yumu blush and say he didn't have to make such insinuations. She wasn't that stupid. By the way, did he come up with that story himself? He replied, of course he made it up. He just wanted to make her laugh. He pulled out a pack of cigarettes and she asked if he smoked. Hao-chan replied that in their day, men who smoked were rare. He just smoked rarely. He used to be a murderer and couldn't bear to smell, but now he's quit, so he indulges occasionally. After that, he winked at her, and Yumu laughed, saying it was funny, and he had a sense of humor. By the way, did he really only finish 9 grades? Hao-chan replied that, frankly, he bought his diploma too. In fact, he only studied up to the senior group of kindergarten in China and spent the rest of his time abroad. Such specialists returning from abroad should at least apply for a management position when applying for a job, but he didn't. Hao-chan replied that returning from abroad didn't mean studying there, and he was talking about Oxford. In fact, he hadn't even gone to elementary school. Yumu laughed and said it was all clear. Now she understood. He was a janitor abroad. At that moment, he realized the atmosphere was strange, and Yumu offered to clink glasses, just like with a foreign janitor. Slowly but surely, success awaits those who are ready. Hao-chan asked in surprise, what, had she had too much? She shouted that she was the company's chairman, and that he shouldn't be teaching her. Hao-chan said that was 56% alcohol, and Yumu slammed her hand on the table and yelled, why isn't he drinking? Let him have 1 shot, and she'll give him a month's salary. Hao-chan replied, stop fooling around. She's drunk, and they need to go home. If she wants to go crazy, let her do it at home and leave him out of it. He grabbed her hand when suddenly Yumu pushed him away, screaming at him to get lost and started drinking straight from the bottle. Hao-chan said she was crazy, and Yumu asked again, has she gone crazy? She's been out of her mind for a long time. He just said she was dragging him into it, but he'd been thinking the same thing all day. Yes, she's a loser and a coward and can't even keep her father in line. She worked so hard for the company, and they say her pretty face did it all for her. At that moment, she smashed the bottle in anger and continued screaming that even her classmates didn't want to talk to her, saying she was arrogant, played hard to get, and was trying to charm men. The guys around her were surprised. What happened? Did they fight? Yumu blurted out that she was really hurt when she saw her dad. Hao-tian didn't know what to say and remained silent, and Yumu continued saying that she was, when suddenly he simply came up to her and hugged her. He put the money on the table and asked the owner to pay. After that, he lifted her onto his back and asked where she lived. He would take her home, but Yumu replied that she didn't want to go home, and Hao-tian didn't know what to do with her now. She fell asleep right on his shoulder. They walked like that for a while until Hao-tian entered the hotel. He greeted the receptionist and asked for a standard double room. She apologized and said that there were only rooms with 1 large bed left. He became embarrassed and said, then with 1 bed. When they entered, he laid Yumu on the bed, and she immediately fell asleep. He silently looked at her, then said no. Hao-chan wasn't the type to take advantage of other people's weaknesses, and that he'd better wash his clothes first, otherwise he'd sweat it all over while carrying them. He began to undress, and Yumu silently asked herself, is this Hao-tian? She became embarrassed and didn't understand why he was undressing. Her head spun, and turning around, he asked when she'd gotten her clothes so dirty. Fine. He'd do her laundry while he was at it. How had she even managed to pull those clothes on? Damn, taking off her skirt was a complete hassle, and Yumu silently begged him not to touch her. He finally took off her clothes and decided to go and do the laundry, but suddenly he felt embarrassed when he looked at her body under the blanket and realized he simply couldn't resist such a sight. He became deeply embarrassed, and voices appeared in his head. A demon said, come on, everything will be fine. And an angel, no, he had to be decent and couldn't take advantage of someone else's weakness. He must never act like animals. At that moment, he was horrified, and a bright flash of light erupted around him. The cleaning lady, who heard their loud voices, was overcome with shame, thinking that they were young people. He laughed and realized that he'd just broken through to the first level of the 9 stars heavenly charter. This was reality, not some online scam. Did things like that really stimulate a breakthrough? If that were true, wouldn't it be amazing? Yumu continued to sleep awkwardly and motionless. Haoshin couldn't take his eyes off her and realized it was all for cultivation. They stopped caring, and suddenly he lifted the blanket, only to become even more embarrassed and yell, "Damn," with no reaction other than his racing heart. He shouldn't have been so happy, you idiot. The first level alone quadrupled his strength, and it's no wonder the old idiot is so eager for the third. Maybe the Heavenly Charter really does talk about immortality? He couldn't waste time. He needed to go home and continue cultivating. When he left the hotel, he told her that she would definitely get some sleep tonight and slammed the door. When Yumu woke up in the morning, she screamed his name and told him to die. Let him get out of here. Suddenly, she looked around and asked where her clothes were and where they had gone. Where was Hao Tian? Why wasn't he there? When did he leave? She didn't remember anything. She went into the bathroom and saw that he had washed her clothes, but he still saw her body. She wouldn't let this go. Sometime later, in her company's skyscraper, she informed him that, as of today, he had officially been transferred to the president's office, and here was his workstation. She, Yining, was his chief assistant, and from now on, she was responsible for his future work. He replied that this was good, and when she led him into the office, she said that was it. President Lin was leaving, and it was time for her to work too. If he wanted to get what he wanted, he should catch up and be smart. He wondered why he felt like she had a murderous aura about her. At that moment, Yumu approached him and asked, "Why is he sitting here? His job is laborer, isn't it?" He replied that he had just finished cleaning the office and would do it again at lunch. If he was missing anything, she should just tell him and he would do it. Yumu was surprised that he was so accommodating today and didn't understand what was going on. Had he cleaned her office? Hao Tian replied that he hadn't yet. She had just arrived and he was afraid to enter without asking. She told him to grab a few things and come see her in the office. When Hao Tian entered, she asked him to close the door. He poured water and sat down on the sofa, saying that it looked like she had slept well today. So, she had managed to get enough sleep after yesterday? Yumu asked why he was sitting across from her. He was just a handyman. Hao Tian replied that there was no one else, and besides, he was her fake boyfriend. Yesterday, he had done her a great service, and he had decided too quickly to resort to the proverb, crossed into the river and broken the bridge. Yumu started yelling at him to keep his mouth shut. She didn't want anyone except Xiaolei to know he was her fake boyfriend. Hao Tian told her not to worry, because he'd read a book on acting, and she tossed him her car keys and said there was an unused car in the parking lot. Next time he needed it, he'd drive it and remember to get his license. She said she wasn't giving it to him as a gift, but just letting him drive it temporarily. Did he understand? He hadn't done much and already wanted a car. Was she stupid? He said better not. He didn't have money for gas. She yelled at him to take the keys and get out of there, and she didn't want to listen to his chatter. At that moment, Yao Yao entered the office and asked if he was there too. Hao Tian waved and said he was just leaving. They could study, and he went to sweep. She wondered if the atmosphere here was different. Had he angered Yumu again? Yumu thought she was giving him a car, and he was turning his nose up at her. What's going on? Even in the morning, the more she thought about it, the angrier she became, and she needed to continue getting revenge on him. She thought they needed to change tactics. They were punishing him too softly so far. Yao Yao told her to be frank, and Yumu said this guy was naturally cut out for physical labor, so she proposed a new system. Under the guise of training, she wouldn't force him to help Yining translate documents, and they'd set his salary as a general laborer's. If he didn't complete the task, they'd release him from that salary, and while they were resting at home, he'd sweat like a pig in the office. The very thought made her happy. Yao Yao said he'd only finished 9 years, so wasn't it too much to force him to translate? Yumu screamed, "Let him do something he's incapable of." Yao Yao saw that she was fuming, and Yumu said she was afraid he wouldn't be able to handle it, and that she'd better have a psychological conversation with him. By the way, how did everything go yesterday? Yumu said everything was fine. They sorted it out, but she needed time to finally let go. Yao Yao smiled and asked again, "Is that true? So he's not that useless. Are they really just pretending? She didn't come home last night, so was she really with him?" Yuma was incredibly angry and started screaming that it was absolutely out of the question. Why would she be with that idiot? She was in the hospital all night. Yao Yao asked again, why did she get so upset? She was just joking. Or was he clinging to her and taking advantage of the opportunity? Yumu became embarrassed and said the wrong word. He saw her naked. When the protagonist went out to the parking lot, he saw an expensive car parked nearby and asked, "Is that it?" He got in and realized it really was new. The smell hadn't yet faded. He looked at his phone and wrote that he would be there soon. He was told that they were waiting for him at the western gate and they needed his help. He said to come down in 10 minutes. Then he stepped on the gas and drove into town. He drove calmly for a while when suddenly a guy in a yellow car drove past and shouted that it was a nice car, but he'd still catch up with him. And his girlfriend asked, "Yulei, why was he swearing so much? He could dye his hair later. He was studying at university and didn't need to act like a street thug." Yulei replied that he understood, and the girl said she hoped he knew that more than a dozen bikers were killed last night. The police were still silent. Did he know anything about it? He replied that although he loved racing, they had no interest in bikers. She looked at him silently and then said it was good that he hadn't gotten involved in this. He should moderate his temper. He shouldn't name too many enemies because at any moment trouble could be inevitable. A person is gone. Life is already happiness, and that should be appreciated. Hao Tian paused and said his speed had slowed considerably. He'd clearly become lax over the past 2 years. He approached Ting Ting and grabbed her shoulder, startling her, causing her to gasp. Hao Tian laughed and asked what business they needed to discuss downstairs. She replied that he'd scared her to death, and shortly after he left, her mother woke up and asked to meet him. He wondered what business it was. He wanted to see her. She could go upstairs and he'd buy something. Ting Ting said there was no need to worry about it, as it was just unnecessary expenses. Hao Tian asked if it was okay to go to a sick person empty-handed. He could just walk there and back. Ting Ting replied, oh well. When the protagonist entered the store, he picked up some fruit and was standing in line. A woman in line started to pay, and when she turned around, she stepped on Hao Tian's foot. He became very angry about this, and the woman apologized to him. Hao Tian replied that nothing happened. The main thing was that it didn't fall on her foot. She was surprised and realized that he had come to the hotel with a girl yesterday, and Hao Tian had asked if she was the receptionist. What a lucky meeting. This made her feel very embarrassed, and Hao Tian looked at her questioningly, after which the girl passed by. He followed her outside, and the girl asked if he was following her. Hao Tian asked again, was he following her? Was she even in her right mind? He was just on his way. She turned around abruptly and said that she was warning him not to attack her. She was warning him about this because she knew all about what he did to that girl yesterday. He asked again, what? She replied that this morning, when she was checking out and she had an angry, offended face, he had taken advantage of the situation yesterday. Hao Tian replied that nothing happened between them yesterday. Did she understand? And even if something had happened, what did it matter to her? She started screaming that he was just a scumbag and a scoundrel, and that he had no shame in saying such things. Hao Tian sighed, feeling annoyed, because it was his fault again because of Yumu. When he returned to his seat, Ting Ting asked why he bought so much stuff. He replied that he didn't know what his aunt liked, so he took all he could. So, does he look okay? Ting Ting blushed and replied that when he spoke like that, it sounded like he was going to see his mother-in-law. Hao Tian scratched his head and replied that it seemed true. He was apologizing. At that moment, she passed by and said that she'd finally found her. She'd already walked around a few times. Ting Ting asked how she'd ended up here. She replied that she had the day off today, so she'd come to see her aunt. By the way, let her guess who she'd just met. Ting Ting asked again, who? She replied that it was the same hypocritical bastard she had told her about on the phone yesterday. At that moment, Ting Ting decided to introduce her to Hao Tian, and she was dumbfounded and started screaming that he was that same bastard. Ting Ting said, Xiaolan, she should stop fooling around. He is her distant cousin. Lan was surprised. Cousin? Where did she get such an unreliable brother? He has a terrible character. The protagonist said, stop. What did she dislike about his character? She raised her index finger and shouted, he rented a room for an affair. That's why he has a terrible character. Ting Ting held out her hand and said, stop it. The protagonist said, renting a room does not equal an affair. She had overdone it. He didn't know where she lived. He had to leave her somewhere. He couldn't sleep on the streets. Ting Ting looked away and said, Lan, you can't talk about Brother Hao Tian like that. He is not what she thinks. Brother Hao Tian, he shouldn't pay attention to Lan either. She has such a character. Then Lan asked, Ting Ting, is he her distant cousin? Who knows why he came now? Maybe with impure intentions. Ting Ting shouted, stop it, Lan. She shouldn't complicate things, okay? Mom just woke up. Can she calm down a bit? The protagonist walked to the door and, turning slightly, said, Ting Ting, he's sorry. All sorts of nonsense has been happening all day today. They can talk for now. He'll go see his aunt. Ting Ting replied, Brother Hao Tian, she's apologizing. Lan clearly misunderstood him. She's apologizing for her. He waved his hand and told her not to worry. He has no grudge. He has a generous soul. It's not worth quarreling with her. But for the sake of that girl's honor, he must clarify. She was with him last night, but nothing happened between them. That's all. Whether she believes it or not, she must decide for herself. Lan looked thoughtfully into his eyes. At that moment, MC walked into the ward. Ding Chun looked at him and asked, is he Hao Tian? He confirmed, yes, that's right. She said she had heard about him from Ting Ting a long time ago. He put the bag of apples on the bedside table, and she added, she was glad he came, and brought so many other things. He told her not to move. She was still very weak. It was better for her to lie down. Then Lan entered the room and said, Auntie, she came to see her. Chiyun replied, Lan, she is so caring, but she should run to the hospital less often. She has a lot of things to do at home. She objected. This can't be. She will miss Aunt Chiyun. Chiyun smiled and said, thank you, dear. The next second, she clutched her chest, and Lan cried out in alarm. Mom, what's wrong with her? Everything was fine. Why again? Mom, she will call the doctor. With these words, she headed for the exit. At that moment, the protagonist looked at Chiyun seriously. He came closer, took her hand, and began to feel her pulse. A bead of sweat rolled down his face, and then he sent a stream of energy into Chiyun's hand. She looked at him in surprise. The next second, a doctor entered the room. He noticed the protagonist's hand on the patient's arm and asked, does he understand medicine? The protagonist turned to him and asked, what made him think so? The doctor replied, Chiyun's condition currently seems to be normal. It's very strange she recovered without treatment. He thought, All these oddities began after he appeared. Could it all be connected with him? Then he came closer and said he too studied traditional Chinese medicine. He had just seen him checking her pulse. If it's convenient, would they come into his office to talk? The protagonist replied, okay. Yan Yongji thought in surprise. He's not denying it. He definitely did it. After a while, they entered the office, and Yongji closed the door behind them. MC looked at him in surprise, and he bowed and exclaimed, Mr. Haoqian, he should let his disciple bow to him. The protagonist replied, Dr. Yongji, he shouldn't scare him like that. He hasn't said anything yet, and he's already bowing to his teacher? Yongji replied, he was able to restore Qiyun's health without the help of modern medicine. For that alone, he deserves his bow. The protagonist smiled awkwardly and said, Dr. Yongji, he did indeed study medicine a little with his mentor as a child, but this was his first time practicing. So, 90% of the time, he was lucky. He is a true specialist in healing and saving lives. Yongji thought in surprise. He never practiced and cured someone just like that? If you think about it like that, what are hospitals for? Then he said, Mr. Haotian, if possible, he would like him to continue participating in the treatment. To be honest, with his level of medicine, he's not sure he can completely cure Qiyun on his own. The protagonist responded thoughtfully, okay. If he says so, he won't refuse. His treatment methods are truly very unusual. That's why he asks not to disclose them too widely. The doctor handed him a folder with documents and replied, of course, and he will give him his full support. Perhaps these materials will be useful. The protagonist began to read the contents and asked, Yongji, is he sure he can be trusted? Does he really understand traditional medicine? He replied, his supervisor is a highly respected expert in traditional medicine, so he understands something about it too. Truly, traditional medicine began to fade away several hundred years ago, which led to the decline of this one. MC smiled and remarked, Yongji, he's not like everyone else. This is admirable. He thinks that if he possessed these skills of traditional medicine, he could be much more useful than he is. Yongji said, Mr. Haochen, he wants to say something. Before he could finish speaking, the protagonist added, although his methods are classified and not passed on to outsiders, if he were to pass them on to his own person, it wouldn't be a violation, right? Besides, he possesses not only high medical skill, but also noble ethics, so he's not too worried. If he wants to learn, then he must kneel. Yongji was surprised, so he's asking him to become his disciple. He thought, the medicine that saved Qiyun from death can't be ordinary. This is a huge opportunity. It's worth kneeling for. The next second, he actually knelt, bowed his head, and shouted, Disciple Yongji greets the teacher. The protagonist laughed lightly and said, he'll send him a few recipes on his phone. He should then study acupuncture and pharmacology. When he has time, he will impart the knowledge in more detail. After that, he handed the phone to the doctor, and Yongji, looking at it in surprise, exclaimed, Thank you, teacher. MC then headed for the exit and, turning slightly, added, he must carefully consider what he received. He replied, Teacher? The student is inviting him to dinner. He begs. He must not refuse. This is a banquet in honor of the initiation into the training. The protagonist replied, they should abandon these worldly ceremonies. He will simply say goodbye and leave. Yongji bowed and said, in that case he will not see him off. He will continue to study diligently. MC replied, yeah, he must try hard. He is counting on him. After that, he left the office and, looking at the phone, said, I finally realized how hard it is to be a mentor. Teaching students is a real hassle. Because he was delayed so much, he needs to get back to training immediately. He will text Tingting and tell her. Sometime later, the protagonist was sleeping in his bed. His phone rang, its ringtone insistently demanding that he answer. The protagonist picked it up and sleepily asked, hello, who is this? Yao Yao screamed indignantly. Is he dead? Did he just pick up? He looked at the phone screen and said, Yao Yao? She screamed. He's been absent for 2 days without a good reason. He must come to work quickly. The MC replied, yes, he's already getting ready. After a while, Lu Yining screamed indignantly. Why should she work for him? If he doesn't want to work, he should just say so. They'll get rid of him quickly. Doesn't he know how many people want his job? He smiled awkwardly and scratched the back of his head. Something urgent had come up at home and he hadn't had time to ask for time off. Yining was indignant. Who doesn't have problems at home? If that's the way things are, everyone can skip work. She'll cut their salary in half this month. Next time, he'll deduct everything. He said, Assistant Yining, she's too strict. Yao Yao then approached them, called Yining over, and remarked, she's a middle manager. She should act prudently and not go to extremes. Cutting off half his salary right away? Is that really the company's policy? Yining apologized and said she realized her mistake. Then Yao Yao looked at the protagonist and said, Hao Tian, they haven't seen each other for so many years. She'd already forgotten the last time she saw him. She believes he had important business at home. Everyone makes mistakes, right? He exclaimed. Miss Yao Yao, she's super. Thank you. Yao Yao thought, but he's great. She deserved to treat him. And then she added, her attitude is right. She deserved to believe in him. So they'll do this. Deduct a whole month's salary. Next time, he'll be fired immediately. Hao Tian was surprised. Huh? Ms. Yao Yao, is she joking? She told him not to worry. If he started working more for the company, such problems would no longer occur. He shouted, Ms. Yao Yao, she shouldn't worry. He may not have any other strengths, but he can work quickly. He can endure difficulties. Yao Yao laughed to herself and thought, he's he's taken the bait. Hao-chan, he said it himself. Then she said, then he can help Assistant Yining with the translation of documents. He was surprised again. Huh? A few hours later, the protagonist stretched his arms, sighed loudly and said, time's up, finally home. But the next second, Yining put a huge stack of papers on his desk. He said, come on, Assistant Yining, does she seriously want him to translate? He doesn't know how. She replied, if he can't, he'll learn. There's a computer over there, he should use a translation program. He said, what a hassle, this is hindering his cultivation. Okay, he better play a little first, he needs to relax. He opened a computer game, then looked at his assistant's desk and thought, oh, she has so many documents piled up, a real mountain. Then he sighed loudly, leaning his elbows on his fist, and said, but he has a kind heart, he will help her, just like a living Buddha. 2 hours later, MC asked, Assistant Yining, when can they leave work? She replied, he can go first. She still has 3 hours of work. After that, the protagonist took a flash drive and said, he translated all the documents. She should take a look. Yining thought in surprise. Translated? Is he kidding? Then she inserted the flash drive into the USB port and thought, oh well, she will take a look. Although, it's probably some kind of nonsense. The next second, her eyes widened in surprise, and she asked, huh, this, she thought, not only is the translation accurate, but the style is also polished. Then the protagonist walked past her and asked, Assistant Yining, was it she who translated? There seemed to be a few grammatical errors. She looked at him and asked, does he also understand German? He smiled and noted that it was not so. He just talked to a couple of German guys before. He knows how they speak. Yining thought in surprise. Talked? This guy is crazy. Then she asked, Haotian, isn't he by any chance a spy from another company? Maybe he's here on some kind of mission?